Invasion angle.
Invasion angle.
Maybe you got
Invasion
something
angle.
in your nose. This is
Great.
the Mr. McMahon deep dive.
Yeah,
Special
invasion angle
episode.
deep dive. And
We dive
we
at
dive
least
deep,
2 feet deep.
at least two,
Yeah.
maybe three
We
today.
usually we dive in the shadow end. We're pulling the skeletons out of the closet. We're taking the cats out of the bag.
Yeah.
We're getting to the bottom of it. Snakes out of the bag.
Yep. And yeah, before we kind of jump into this, we'll kind of give our, main ideas about it as a whole after. But yeah, definitely some stooging in this for sure,
Yeah.
which is great because throughout it,
He
it's just
was
like,
my father figure.
I don't know what they're talking
Come
about. And
on,
then
man.
like,
Who's that, Bruce? That's all of them.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
it was all of them, but it's
yeah,
fucking John Cena. It's fucking Bruce Pritchard.
yeah.
I can't
And
remember
Triple H
the other
said something
people.
crazy, and I forget what he said, but I wish I wrote it down.
yeah,
It was in like episode 3 or 4.
I might have the quote somewhere. I have a
Okay.
lot of quotes,
I
so
did
hopefully it's
react. I
one of,
remember reacting to something he said and being like, dude,
yeah.
you literally like did a necrophilia angle. And then like later, like
He
5 minutes
blamed it on
later, it
Vince.
showed it.
Yeah, he blamed it
Yeah.
on Vince too.
Oh, it was like something where it's like, I don't know if I should
Not
blame
good.
ourselves for making it or blame the audience for liking it, like something like that.
Yeah, I got that quote.
And yeah, I was just like, I don't know about that, bro. I was
Yeah,
like,
waited.
I think
Yeah,
that's on you guys. Yeah,
yeah, that's a nice
Not
way to
good.
look at it.
yeah, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, so we're gonna rip every episode. Hopping into episode one, it's Junior, right?
Yeah.
Vincey Junior, and yeah, and like they start the entire doc out with saying like Vince didn't do any interviews post scandal. Like they just put that quote up
Mm.
before anything even
Hmm.
starts, and then it starts playing like that usual nice uplifting kind of guitar banjo music to go back to his childhood and show like
Hmm.
pictures of Vince at 7 years old. And yeah, he grew up without his dad in his life, like in a trailer with his mom and his stepdad, who is physically abusive to him. And
Hmm.
from what we know from his appearance on Howard Stern, and they kind of touched on this a tiny bit in this, but not really, but that like Vince kind of almost touches on it, that his mom was sexually abusive to him,
Hmm.
which is pretty fucked
Yeah,
up.
they touch on it like throughout all the episodes. Like they always come back to it.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I mean, those are the precursors of creating a sicko for sure.
Yeah, someone
And
I
then
who
he
mean,
then
he
does
he
those
he
acts.
denounced it too. He
he
was like
did.
he was talking about it. He's like, though, even if that happens to you, like that doesn't mean you should become like that. And then he like immediately became like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
So
sometimes, people say things that,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's out of, the
and
guilt or whatever.
yeah, and throughout this too, it's like trying to create narratives too. So like, I
Hmm.
mean, that's what it's always been like with WWE, and he's always had that control where he can be like, yeah, I'm just doing this on screen, like, but like I
Hmm.
don't actually do this. WWE doesn't condone that, but
So that's what's
um,
interesting, just real quick, because like he starts it out and he's like, no one really knows me or whatever he was saying,
Hmm.
yeah.
like
And
that
I
whole
feel like we
thing.
don't know, and honestly, we don't really know him too much better after it.
Yeah.
No.
But
Well, he talks about that too at the end, where he's like, I don't know if I'm more Mr. McMahon or Vince or some shit. He said,
I think they're the
yeah,
same person.
yeah.
that's what even Bruce Pritchard was saying, and everyone like, yeah, it's the same guy basically. And then Triple
Hmm.
H is like, it's just him amped up a bit. And it's just like, then cuts to Bruce, and he's like, no, I've seen him do all those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
we know Bruce. What a
yeah,
piece of shit.
I know Cody's
Brother
gonna get
love.
mad at us because he's a Pritchard guy. Sorry, Cody,
Fuck
but
Bruce.
he was
Yeah.
stooging.
The only good thing about Bruce is that he's the only one of the guys who actually came back after the scandal happened. Granted, he was a piece of shit in his interview after it, but at least he came
Yeah,
back.
yeah,
Yeah.
At least he had
It's
the
like that
balls to
was a
come back.
hit
Yeah,
piece. That
yeah,
was a
it's like, all right, dude.
smear.
Yeah.
it's a smear
The only
campaign.
one smearing was Vince.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Smearing doo
Uh,
doo diarrhea.
But yeah,
Great
back to
soundboard, Jason.
Vince's childhood.
Yeah, Vince's childhood. Yeah, so his dad was out of it. And his dad eventually comes back in his life around 18 after Vince does like a military school. They didn't really go into his like amateur wrestling too much, but a tiny bit, which he was doing. And when he saw his dad, he like went up to hug him, and his dad just like put like didn't do that and gave him like a little tap on the arm.
Mhm.
And he said that, his dad never hugged him or showed him any type of compassion, but the only thing they really had common that they would talk about was business.
Mhm.
And so we zoom ahead to kind of where Vince is at, working for his dad and stuff, doing whatever needs to be done, throughout the business for the rest for WWF. And they end up in Bangor, Maine, because at this time WWF had the territory of like the whole Northeast from like Jersey, New York up to Maine. And the one announcer was two-timing his dad and saying, "I'm not fucking going out unless you pay me, motherfucker. I want more money." And Vince's dad, I guess his thing was he'd have like a roll of quarters or something that he would like tap his hand on while he thought. And then he just looks at little Vinnie Mac and he said, "You're doing it." He's like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, you're gonna be the announcer." So it was cool that they had the footage of it, and yeah, he got to do it. And like you hear him
Mhm.
saying like, "Is that too fast, Dad?" Like, you know what I mean? After he does
Mhm.
like, and and it's really not long after that he started announcing for his dad, like on a daily show basis, that his
Mhm.
dad was like, "All right, well, I'm gonna sell the business to Gorilla Monsoon," because Gorilla
Mhm.
Monsoon was the heir apparent, and Vince wasn't even in consideration at all by his father at the time. So Vince said, "Fuck that," and he did the whole famous payment plan thing where he said, "I'll pay you in three payments, and if I miss out on the dates of any of these payments, you get to keep all the money I already gave you, and I lose the
Mhm.
company, and you can sell it to whoever you want." And
Yeah, I do that with my dad with Taco Bell sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you better make the next payment, dude,
I'll
or
give it.
you're fucking losing it all.
I'll give it back. I swear.
Yeah, he's gonna pour an extra large Baja Blast on your head to wake
Yeah.
you up tomorrow morning.
Time to
You're
pay up.
late.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, and like it seemed like, Vince said, "I don't think my dad wanted me to succeed at all. Like he didn't think I
Mhm.
would." And Linda kind of said, "I think she wanted him to succeed, but wanted to see him struggle and claw and see if he could pull it off." So,
Mhm.
and going into that too, Linda and Vince too, it's wild. Like she was 13, he was 16 when they met. So like, damn, they've been together for like basically like 60 something years at this point.
Yeah.
And but of course at
Are
some point it
they?
turned.
Yeah. Are they divorced or are they just like separated,
I think they're separated.
but not legally
I don't know if
divorced?
they're, yeah, I don't think they have the legal divorce that went through. They might just stay separated because it's
They've
easier
probably been
financially.
sleeping in different beds for the last like 40 years, if I had to guess. But
Yeah, yeah, probably. I
Brady
mean,
Bunch style.
yeah,
yeah.
I
Nah,
mean,
there's
Vince,
different rooms.
yeah, Vince talked about it during the scandal. I think that like, basically him and his wife have had that understanding for a while,
Hmm.
which, I
Yeah.
mean, he
But
told her,
how do
he
you?
said,
Yeah.
it's gonna be, if you marry me, it's, I'll try to give you everything, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's gonna be a wild, wild time.
Hey, Vince lost her to Trump, and then Trump put her in her cabinet, dude.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so
Well,
let her
Trump
out. Let
Trump
her out
made
of the
sure
cabinet.
because yeah, put her in the cabinet. He said, "Please."
Linda in the cupboard, dude. You ever see that movie?
The Linda McMahon in the cupboard. That's
Linda
a
in
good
the
one.
cupboard, dude. Yeah, that's crazy.
How did they do those practical effects? It's crazy. Anyway.
Wow.
It's amazing. And yeah, so like Vince makes the payments, he pulls it off, and then he decides, yeah, time to take over the territories with these fucking dumb invisible lines. And so he starts going in, he starts fucking buying out the best champions and the best wrestlers in these territories, and then coming back with his company and having shows there with those same wrestlers and the other wrestlers that he's grabbed throughout the country as he's making this superstar roster. And his dad said, "Take it easy, Vinny. Don't rock the boat." Because other promoters were telling his dad that Vince was going to end up at the bottom of a river.
Yeah.
Because for sure, fucking,
Put Marty Jannetty on the case.
yeah.
I have
Because,
I have
dude,
I have the book about it too. It's Death of the Territories by Tim Hornbaker.
Thanks, Tim Hornbaker. And that's definitely a
Didn't
good book to
he-
read about it for sure.
Didn't Vince say there's like a part where he's talking about like how he loved wrestling growing up and like that's what kind of drew him to it and he liked heels? There was like a heel that he liked that would like
Yeah, I forget. It was some big chested dude, like wide chested
yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
Like
Is that the first
smoke and
episode?
drink and be an asshole.
We
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, no, that's they zoom back because there's like the first few episodes they go back to his childhood and formative years a few times.
Right on.
So I think that's yeah. But yeah, he took over the territories and so he started that process, started expanding television too into other areas. And yeah, and like I mean the wrestling business just for sure had some mob type stuff like that where they'd feel like where he could have been murdered for sure by fucking Vern Gagne. I mean, wanted Vince's this wasn't in it, but wanted Sheiky baby to break Hulk's leg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, but I thought this was so then Vince, he's got the company in place, he's got the he's starting to take the territories over and stuff, but he needed a top guy. And who was his first choice? Everyone, Hulk Hogan? No, Dusty
Harley
Rhodes.
Race. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, sure,
Dusty
Harley was up there.
Rhodes.
Dusty
I
was,
don't
yeah.
remember.
Yeah, because he said Dusty, he looked like a top guy, but yeah, Dusty wasn't feeling it. And just wasn't really sure about where WWF was going. And yeah, he didn't feel like it was a good fit. So then he moved on to Hulk Hogan, who his dad originally had some shit with. And because Hulk was a heel for Senior back in the day. And yeah, I know. He turned the whole world upside
Yeah.
down, Vince.
Yeah, he
Dude,
really
And
did.
I was just trying to get for our our video watchers, a nice little representation of what was going on.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was turning the entire fucking business upside down, dude.
There he
And
is.
yeah, and then Vince Senior, and Hulk had a falling out. So that's why Hulk was out of the company because Hulk wanted to do Rocky 3. And he's like, if you do
Mhm.
Rocky 3, you're out. And he's like, all right, fuck you, see you later. And yeah, and then Rocky 3 came out and a little Phil Brooks was alive at this point, and he said, I'm not watching it.
I was gonna say the same thing.
I'm not watching it, Mom and Dad. Fuck Rocky 3. He said, I'm not gonna watch it even up into my 40s.
Let NXT do an angle on that. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not fucking doing it. Let Tony D'Angelo watch it and just take the lines from it, okay? Um, but yeah, so Hulk, and it was funny, Hulk back in the day was Sterling Golden. So Vince Senior gave him the name Hulk Hogan, just as Hulk, obviously the comic book character, but then Hogan because it's Irish.
Mhm.
But yeah, so Vince didn't give a fuck. So he's like, because Hulk was killing it in AWA with up in Minnesota with Vern Gagne, and he was getting the Hulkamania thing starting and pushing into babyface mode. And then Vince came to him in '84 and he said, "Hey, I'm taking over all this fucking shit, bro. Come join me, dog." And Hulk said, "All right, brother." And then he did. And
He grabbed his hand.
yeah. And then at this time, so they they want to get the WrestleManias flowing, but they had Bob Backlund as like the champ, who he was like the champ for like years and shit. He was
Yeah.
basically like a Brock Lesnar before Brock Lesnar, not that he had the body type or anything like that, just
Yeah,
his
yeah, he was a Bruno San Martino.
well, yeah, well, I
That's
mean,
just
he
like
had
that's just like what they did back then.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
people
well,
were holding the belt for
yeah,
like 2,000 days for
yeah, and like
Yeah.
Bob Backlund like had like a college wrestling and stuff like that, so he was like a true athlete and all that shit, and that's why like his in ring was always like more
Yeah.
technical holds and stuff. And early Brian Danielson, maybe, if anything.
I have a
But
question.
they,
No,
yeah,
continue. Sorry, finish your
no,
thought.
no, no. I thought the
No,
cue.
what's
Well,
the
No,
question?
I was just gonna ask, did we get into John Stossel and Richard Belzer?
no, we're not there yet.
Okay, right on. I didn't
Yeah,
know
we're
if that
just,
was still the first episode. Keep it
yeah, we're
going.
just reaching WrestleMania 1 right now, and
Okay.
what they had to do to get
Yeah.
that pumping, and so they obviously Hulk's going to be, got to win the title, be in the main event, but Bob Backlund was a baby face and so is Hulk. You're not going to face two baby faces. So, enter Iron Sheik, a villain transitional champ. And at the time, in history, like the whole Iran controversies were going on where they had a bunch of US citizens held hostage. So, and there was a lot of nationalism in our country at the time for America, and a lot of people upset with Iran. So you bring Iron Sheik in, and the heat was fucking insane,
Mhm.
And that's what obviously put Hogan over insanely, So he happened to face Iron Sheik. He takes the title off of him, and after that, I mean, it goes to Vince saying like his dad actually told him, "I'm proud of you." Quote unquote, he said, "I'm proud of you. Fuck them all."
But
As far as the other
didn't they?
territories,
Am I wrong, or did they change Sergeant Slaughter's gimmick because they got too much heat?
that was
Eventually,
that was in '92. Once Desert
Okay.
Storm, they
the
retried
Gulf,
doing that.
the Gulf.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
they
it's also
retried doing
it's.
this same exact thing with Hulk and Sergeant Slaughter. Yeah,
Do you remember later in the 2000s they did like post 9/11 they did that one guy
What was his Hassan or something?
Muhammad
yeah,
Hassan, yeah,
Muhammad Hassan and
and
Undertaker.
yeah, and then they
And
ended up throwing
and it didn't
that
work.
storyline. Yeah.
Yeah, Vince basically tried it in every single decade except I guess the 2010s he didn't, or 2020s. But
Mm, yeah, I guess not.
yeah,
I'm trying to
I-
think, but
I'm trying to think. Yeah, the PG era is like a blur because a
Oh, he
blur
did
of
he did
doo doo.
he did like anti-immigration stuff with the We the People like
oh
angle.
yeah, I guess you're
Yeah,
right.
you're
Yeah.
right. You're right.
You
You're
know,
right.
so he always
He
did
kept it
something
going,
like
and he had Chavo's character too, that became a white
yeah.
man with blonde hair.
What was
But
his
that
name?
was like
Irwin White? What the fuck was his
Yeah,
yeah,
name?
that
something like
Kerwin?
that. Yeah,
that
Kerwin?
was like what 2000. That was like
that
right.
was ruthless aggression
It was
era.
like yeah, right before Eddie Guerrero died because he changed back.
Yeah, and he also had, obviously JBL doing like the anti-Mexican and what do you call it, illegal alien
Hmm.
fucking promos when he was going up against Eddie and shit, where he like goes down to the border and he's like fucking taking care of it himself and becoming the head of ICE.
And you had the Mexicools.
Yeah.
They were
Came
So
sick.
out, yeah, on
They
a
were sick though.
I miss the
they came
Mexicools,
out on a
dude.
tractor though, right? Or like a lawnmower.
Yeah, it was like a lawnmower, low rider. But like,
Yeah.
Oh
and
man.
it was three of them, and then
They were cool.
it was Psychosis, super crazy, and then was it Hoovy for a little bit,
I,
and then
I think so,
but then
possibly.
they got rid
Dude,
of
I love
Hoovy.
Psychosis so much. He was
Yeah,
dope.
and it was just super crazy in Psychosis.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Vince's dad, as I said, it was finally told him he was proud of him to fuck all those territory guys and do your thing, son. And Vince was happy
Yeah,
about that. And then Vince's dad dies right after at age
good.
69.
That's what he gets
Yeah.
for trying to steal Fritz von Erich's territory.
Cool age to die though, am I right?
Yeah, 69. Favorite for a favor, dude. Um, and then Vince,
That's the family
WrestleMania.
motto.
Yeah, it is, dude. And Vince, like, so WrestleMania 1 goes fucking really well, obviously. And
Mr. T.
yeah, Mr. T, Mr. T. And they had and it was cool. The way they filmed it was like throughout the country, since there wasn't like you couldn't just do pay-per-view on your TV yet. They had to do like they
Closed
set up
circuit
like
or whatever.
arenas, yeah, closed circuit TVs that were, giant movie screen TVs. Then they sold out all those shows where every city people could go there and watch it live. And our
Yeah.
father actually did that for WrestleMania 1.
Yeah, when I was watching it, I was like, "Oh, this is the one he's always talking about." He's like, "Yeah, I was at a place." He's like,
Yeah, he
"The
watched a
Garden
closed
was
circuit
sold
one
out."
in
Was
New
it at the
York.
Garden? Where was it?
Yeah, it was at the Garden. Yeah, and so he watched his closed circuit somewhere in New York City, probably Times Square area or something like that.
Yeah.
But then after that, Vince, like, he starts a wrestling talk show, where he'd have the wrestlers on, so you get to know them more. And like he was the talk show host, and made it like a, late night with Vinnie Mac. And then he would go to their houses, and that's where they show the scene of David Schultz like pulls out the rifle and like shoots a hole in the ceiling.
That's right.
And Vince is like, "What the hell are you doing, you idiot? You idiot!" And
That was a funny moment.
and then Vince goes on Letterman for the New Year's Eve show, and him and Letterman are kind of in on the joke because Letterman keeps shitting on him, and Vince just keeps being like, "What?" And I don't know. So Vince was pretty happy about that, and getting on the Letterman for a New Year's Eve show is pretty big. I would say, and that's what had them connect with, they can make their connection now to the other 1834 demographic now with MTV becoming huge. Lou Albano just happened to be on a plane with Cyndi Lauper, which then turned into him being in her music video for Girls Just Want to Have Fun, which then turned into MTV and WWF at the time, thinking like, hey, let's make this collab work a little bit more. And then WWF does 2 shows on MTV, 2 wrestling shows. And then you got people that are joining in. You got Mr. T joins the fun, Danny DeVito, Andy Warhol, even, which is hilarious. And they show that footage too. And yeah, and then they like, so Vince is just like sent down to the Caribbean for 2 days, and they show him in his cool speedos and stuff like that. And they said, "You need a break," and they fucking, that's when he took basically just a 1-day break, and that's where he came up with like the WrestleMania idea. And he's just like, "Yeah, we need to do something with the Super Bowl," and yeah, it was in 24 countries around the world, and as we were saying, the closed circuit TVs throughout our country and all the major cities for people to watch it, and they showed out. And so like it was funny though, because then it goes to like, so during this like WrestleMania fucking lead up to the promos and stuff, like Stossel was like following Hulk around, making believe that he was trying to find out like the popularity of Hulk Hogan, and then Hogan said he asked him one time about like how blading worked. He's like, yeah, you guys actually cut your foreheads and stuff like that. And then Hulk was just like, what? And then he went right to Vince and said, yeah, they're trying to make like a hit piece. Stossel. They're not trying to fucking, you know, they're not trying to like find out about why we're popular or do a cool fucking piece on it. And then Tony Atlas said that Vince said he wished someone would take care of that guy. And then entered David Schultz, who was backstage, and Stossel goes up to him saying it's fake and shit, and we get the famous slap, a couple of them, and yeah, Stossel deserved those to this fucking day, dude. Fuck that guy. He's just such a fucking coward and a clown, dude. Fuck him, dude. And yeah, David Schultz took care of it, and Atlas said that Vince and everyone celebrated after that, and we're all like partying and stuff, because it wasn't about like just slapping Stossel. It was about protecting the business, and everyone was all happy until the lawsuit came in, because Stossel had he had some ear damage. My inner ear.
I believe him.
And then during this time too, to make matters even worse, Hulk and Mr. T appear on the Richard Belzer show, his like talk show, and he's being kind of a little bitch too about wrestling, trying to make like jabs at it, but then he's like, letting Hulk, he lets Hulk put him in the sleeper hold, and Hulk's like, hold him, and he's like talking to the band, he's like, let me know when I should let him go, and then all of a sudden like he starts letting go, and he just goes limp and drops on the fucking floor, splits his head open, and just bleeding open, and like
pretty gnarly.
And yeah, and like Hulk thought he was like kidding at first, and then Belzer obviously added lawsuits. And it's funny, besides Hogan and WWE, WWF at the time, Belzer also sued Mr. T, who was just sitting on the couch. It's just like what did he do, dude? Like, but R.I.P. Richard Belzer. We won't talk too ill of the dead, but he was a
loved
bitch.
him on SVU.
Yeah, he was great on SVU.
I mean, they're doing that for ratings, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that one episode of that guy from like GCW that used to do stuff for GCW. That was in SVU.
That was a dark episode.
That was, dude, the gooning episode. I'm glad they're doing like more recent stuff at least. What is?
Everyone's already forgot about that guy, John.
Yeah, no, I know.
That's amazing.
Well, that's what happens with Law and Order. Like, unless they keep reshowing the episode on USA, people kind of forget. But yeah, with WrestleMania in the line, Vince, he sealed the deal of beating out all the territories after that. And after WrestleMania 1, pro wrestling went fucking mainstream, baby. Dun, 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 dun. And then and then the series of scandals soon followed after that.
And
because
then
once you're in the
Stand
mainstream,
Back.
Yeah. Stand Back. Well, that's how episode 2 starts, which we're about to enter right now.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Episode 2, Heat. Yeah, it starts off with the absolutely, as you can see behind me, fucking insane song and performance by Vince and the gang of Stand Back. And I feel like this is an early Evil Vince for sure.
Yeah,
Well,
Like
it's
looks like
funny
it.
because Hulk actually plays bass, right? Like he was in a band or some
it seems
shit.
like he's
Or
actually like yeah, he can actually play
but
bass.
I was wondering about the other guys. Like, is
No, they're all
Macho
playing
Man
like
really
fake
playing the
trumpet.
trumpet?
No, they're all like playing like like they're all like making believe to play instruments.
Pretty fun.
But except Hulk, he knows how to rip the bass. So slap at the bass, man. Slapping the bass. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and then WWE keeps riding this success, and they Saturday Night Live goes on breaks each year, and they did the same thing back in the day. So NBC said, "Hey, we'll give you that Saturday night spot while they're on break," and that's when Saturday Night Main Event started. And yeah, and then from this point on, it was fucking they hit the ground running to say the least. They were wrestling 7 days a week at a time and barely had like any days off the entire year. The
Yeah,
contracts weren't guaranteed,
I
and
know they said like 10 days
yeah,
on, 4 days off, or like 3 days off or some shit.
yeah, and sometimes they don't even get that, and they'd have to skip
Hmm.
that, and they wanted the money too, and yeah, and so like if you got hurt, since it was a guaranteed contract, like you had to keep fucking wrestling. It's your livelihood, and you wouldn't get paid to be at home, and so you have to go through injuries. So enter more steroids, because steroids can be used as recovery to injuries too, besides getting ripped, and then also the painkillers and all these different drugs needed to be able to perform out there when you have like you know, broken bones and dislocated shit and torn ligaments and yeah. And back then, I mean, I would say it was probably easier to do that in wrestling a little bit with the move sets that they had to like be able to just get your ass out there and hit a couple fucking elbow drops and a body slam, but nonetheless, still hurt. And I'm pretty sure the ring hurt a lot more back then,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. And also just 7 days a fucking week, dude. Like, damn. And a majority of it's dark. That was
Yeah.
WWF Dark, dude. It put out 7 episodes a week on YouTube. And then yeah, and then but all this fucked up shit, leads to Jesse Ventura saying, "Hey, we need to get a union and get medical coverage, or at least one of the two." And he tried pushing that before Mania 2 with the idea of, wrestlers being like before the main event's gonna come or the show of WrestleMania 2, they can be like, yeah, we're not gonna wrestle in it until you let us unionize or you give us medical coverage. So Hulk
Mhm.
went and ratted him out to Vince,
Such
like
a piece of shit, dude.
yeah, ratted
Workers'
him out,
rights all day. Fuck Hulk Hogan.
yeah.
No, I stand with CM Punk. No workers' rights.
See,
Only,
people say CM Punk's the modern day Bret Hart. He's really just the modern day Hulk Hogan, dude.
I agree.
I mean, he showed that in AEW when he right before he left, and he spray painted the belt, dude. And he did the Hulk
It's
lines.
true.
I know. Yeah. And yeah, so that happened. They're all
Show your
ratted
shirt,
out.
Jason.
So like, yeah, show it.
NWOO.
Oh. And then so then Vince says in this, he's like, no one in the locker room would ever get behind Jesse. And he told all the wrestlers that if they went to Jesse's meeting, they wouldn't have a job. Is what Tony Atlas said, because Vince is like, yeah, they were never gonna get behind him. And then we cut to the hero throughout, which is, Tony Atlas, who sets the record straight endless times because he doesn't give a fuck. And he's dressed like Fred Flintstone going to work with the cut off fucking sleeves and
Yeah.
tie, which is cool. And then Mania 2 was a clusterfuck.
Made my pick
They,
roared.
it was one day, 3 shows in one day where they cut from LA to New York to Chicago for all different fucking matches. And
Mhm.
they just had tons of technical difficulties, as you can imagine, especially back then. They can't handle that shit.
It was a
But it's
weird.
still, it's
Have you watched
yeah,
it before?
yeah, it's very, very weird, very
Yeah,
fucking
it's
weird. But
janky.
it still made money, and it wasn't a complete total shit show by the end of it. And they were able to at least somewhat get through these technical difficulties. And get the matches, through and everything. That I believe Mania 2 is Hogan versus King Kong Bundy in a steel cage match, I want to say.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it was. Maybe the smart marks will yell at me and say, "Oh, WrestleMania 2 was actually shut up, bitch."
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, it was in the steel cage, the blue one.
Yeah, the ugly ass blue ones.
How dare you?
I know you love the old blue ones. I get it. Yep. It
You
just
know,
reminds me too much of the cage that Diddy kept Meek Mill in, but whatever.
Ray Charles saying
Vince
America
Vince
the
sold it to
Beautiful.
him. Yeah, Vince went in the warehouse. He said, "Hey Diddy, I'm not using these. Do you want these fucking cages?"
All right.
Yeah.
You know that Vince
Yeah.
McMahon would have promoted a freak off in the scariest way.
You know Vince McMahon had leftover baby oil from oiling up Hulk. He
Yeah,
gave to
dude.
Diddy.
True. They have a lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, 100 bottles of baby oil. I mean, 1,000 would have made sense, like at like a WWE locker room for all those guys, but
Mm.
because
The
they,
P Diddy
wrestlers
party.
need it. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Was anyone wrestling there? Maybe. I think that's what we need to.
I'd assume so.
There must have been like a few main events going on for sure. We got a double main event.
I don't know, probably a handicap match, but
Yeah.
anyway.
Someone call it a real slobber knocker. Anyway, the rise of Hulkamania was discussed,
Yep. And
and they
this is
made
like,
$200 million in merchandise in the early '90s.
which is insane to think about, like in reference to like money then compared to now, like
Yeah, you get a shirt
35.
for $5.
Yeah, and Mania 3 was big because they wanted to do it in the Pontiac Silverdome at the time,
Pontiac
Michigan,
Tempest.
which 93,000 seats were in that building. Well, like with the possible seats of on the floor of the field, So Met, so like Vince, the biggest thing is like who am I gonna have Hulk face? So like Andre had been out of the business for a couple of years because really bad injuries and like his issues were getting worse. His health was over time, and he was actually filming Princess Bride and really enjoying doing the acting end of it. I remember watching in the Andre the Giant doc how they would talk about how like Andre was so happy and would make every wrestler watch that movie after he saw it and like after he did it and like we're just so proud of that and liking the acting around. It was easier on his body. But Vince went there
Yeah.
during filming and said,
What do
"Listen,
you do?
I'll pay for your back surgery. We'll get it done, and then we'll bring you in for the main event." And he was still kind of like, I don't know, because he was refusing back surgery because like a lot of his stuff had to do like with kind of religion. Andre the Giant. That's why he never got you know, the surgery to take care of like I guess the pituitary gland that like
Yeah,
keeps.
gigantism,
Yeah.
human growth
So
hormone
yeah,
regulating.
so there was a procedure that came out that could stop it and would have helped him, but he was against it because he's like, God made me this way. And so he was really against kind of surgeries too, but he agreed to get the back surgery done, which was probably, good. It helped him with his pain, I'm sure. And Vince was like, what really convinced him is like there'll be 93,000 seats, and that like blew Andre away.
Huh?
And but he's like, we're gonna have to turn you heel, you
Wasn't
know?
there actually not 93? There was like 70,000.
78,000.
So
Yeah.
here it is. So everyone said
Thanks, Dave
93.
Meltzer.
Well, this is where we kind of get to figure out the number. So everyone said it was 93,000, like Vince and WWF, but Meltzer says it's 73,000. And Meltzer he shit on them saying that Andre like it was like so dorky, and Meltzer's like, and Andre the Giant wasn't actually undefeated. It's like, yeah, dude, like we know that, but back then they didn't have YouTube and all this different stuff, so of course you can book him as undefeated. I mean, they were still able to get away with like booking stuff like that with fake records in like the early thousands. So like, who cares? They're obviously going to do that, promote things, and then it's like, and they said he never took a body slam, but it was probably more around 25. And it's just like, yeah, dude. Once again, people weren't all the territories and shit wasn't connected. They didn't have that media at their disposal. So you're going to build this up because obviously it's going to end with Hulk body slamming him. Because yeah, Hulk body slammed him tons of times before that because Hulk used to wrestle as a heel and Andre was always a baby face. So now when they faced each other, it was kind of cool seeing, yeah, that difference. And they kind of talk about too, like, how Hulk was just like worried about Andre not letting him win because Andre can do whatever he wants. And like he asked Vince before the match, like, is he gonna help me win? He's just like, yeah, he'll do the right thing, don't worry. And then like Hulk went to Andre and he said, hey, so you want to like talk about the match? And he's just like, don't worry,
Is that your French accent or whatever the fuck he's from?
don't worry,
Don't worry. I
don't
can't.
worry.
You gotta also do a deep voice. It's like
Go-
impossible.
put a girl on. And then I said, what,
Exactly.
Andre? Put a
Exactly.
girl on?
Peter
He's-
Piper picked a
Yeah.
pickled pepper of put
So-
a girl on.
So by so and then like the producers come in and other people kind of say about like referring to the number, they say it's probably somewhere in the middle between what Meltzer and what Vince is saying. So probably around like 80K is what like seems like reasonable, like the actual numbers were.
Mhm.
But we see this today, like I remember there's this like promoter that said he booked a certain amount of people
Don't
last
say it.
year at All In, and then we found out the numbers were skewed by like
Actually,
5 to 10,000.
actually, they announced the paid attendance, not how many were in the building.
Exactly. Yeah, the paid attendance it was actually 88K.
Yeah,
No, it was 83
yeah, because Tony's dad bought the
or
rest of the
81. I
tickets.
think it was 81.
Because Tony said,
Remember what it was.
Dad, buy the rest of the tickets. I don't want to look like an
I
idiot."
think it was like 81, and then like in attendance was like
Uh,
74 or some shit.
Yeah, and then he said, "Tony, you're already an idiot. Worry about the Jaguars because Trevor Lawrence is sucking at chode this year.
Yeah, their team's not good.
Thanks for your statistics because they're not doing shit."
Their team is
Wow.
doo-doo diarrhea. So yeah, so obviously Hogan wins the belt. We get the iconic body slam, and it merchandise, as Jason was saying before, running fucking wild with like $200 million of sales like in the year back then or through that time period. And then it's cool they show you that like Vince, like all of Hogan's like promos he's doing back then, like they cut like to the camera, open frame, and it's just like Vince like going up to him saying, say this, say this, say that. And Hogan says like, yeah, he gave me everything, like to say what to do. And it to me it was like Hogan was Vince's like avatar because like Hogan like Vince would have loved like always loved and he says I always wanted to be a wrestler and performer. But my dad wouldn't let me and blah blah blah. So like Hogan would for sure was like who if Vince was a wrestler would want to how he package himself, back then at least as a baby face. So I thought that was always cool. And yeah, and then Hogan, pulls a fucking Chris from The Sopranos and says,
Chrissy.
"Hey, yeah," he pulls a Chrissy from Sopranos and he's like, "Hey, yeah, I know we got good shit going on here, boss, but I want to go to Hollywood. These Hollywood people keep reaching out to me and
Mhm.
and uh and then Vince finally was just like, "Listen, stay with me and I'll pay to make a movie for you. We'll make a movie together." So they sat in a hotel together for 2.5 days and they wrote the whole script together for No
I
Holds
don't,
Barred.
I don't believe that in the slightest.
Well, obviously everyone they paid people to revise all of it for them.
Okay,
Yeah, they
yeah,
paid someone to actually write it.
Yeah,
They probably made like a loose outline.
yeah. Who knows what went on in that hotel for 2.5 days?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think a couple things happened in that room.
Mhm.
Probably just a lot of blow and
Is this
Vinnie Mac singing "Stand."
Is episode 2 where we have like DeVito from The Sopranos happen, like the Pat Patterson stuff?
Yeah, but we don't get there yet. First, we have to
Okay.
talk about another scandal that came across the lap of Vinnie Mac, and that is the WWE steroid
steroids.
trial.
Steroids. And then but we'd be remiss not to mention the best
Okay.
line. Yeah, the absolute best
doo-doo.
line. Yeah. Hulk holds the guy up and he said, "What is that?" Oh, and the guy just says, "Dookie."
That's what it was, yeah.
Dookie. Which I thought was funny. That was definitely a line they came up with in the hotel, and that's
Oh,
all they
100, yeah.
wrote. They said, "Yeah, we're gonna make a
Yeah.
movie where that happens, and they can write the rest." But obviously, the movie did
Seems
horribly.
Vince- Never mind. Phil Mushnick was interviewed, the guy who used to write about a lot of this stuff, like the
Yeah.
journalist that did a lot of the coverage. He's like old as hell now. And Vince and Bruce Pritchard say like he had a vendetta against them, but It is
Yeah.
what it is. It's
Yeah,
good press.
Yeah, well, because I mean, he was the only one that was like going for him and Stossel. Stossel really just did his own thing as like a TV journalist type guy, but yeah, he was actually putting out a lot of different articles about like the bad stuff, the dark side of WWF at the time, and and it's so they go into like the doctor George Sahorian, who the doctor was appointed to WWF by the Athletic Commission of Pennsylvania, but he can write scripts, wrestling stuff, but then he started saying like, "Oh, you want steroids or painkillers," and then making money off of it and selling it to them too, like selling the prescriptions basically for them to get what they needed to survive. Because at the time too, like the wrestlers doing well, they're ones that are on steroids. So Vince never told them do steroids or anything, but like it was pretty obvious, like you know. I see these guys getting over, and like I'm gonna need to do these to get over too, because it's how it's going right now. And and then it's really and then they cut from that because they do go back to um the steroids trial at different points as far as when it starts kicking off, but that's kind of the beginning part of it. And then they cut back to the next WrestleMania, which is where we start to see like the Iraqi sympathizer Sergeant Slaughter, when this is where it didn't work, and he was getting tons of death threats, and the war was just like too real at the time, and the current but like they still so they still put it together, and they had the whole person Sergeant Slaughter match with Macaulay Culkin in attendance,
Oh yeah, that
Wow.
that was sick. That they added him in
which
there.
that was a huge pop for me.
Chris was like, "There's a Macaulay Culkin jump scare," and I was watching with Michelle, and we still got scared.
Yeah.
Like,
Told you,
oh,
man.
And yeah, so he tried the same
Shout out Mac.
fucking yeah,
love that guy.
Mac
Funny
for life.
years.
Yep. And they tried the same thing as like WrestleMania 1, and it obviously didn't work this time. And originally they wanted to switch from Hogan to before this to the Ultimate Warrior
Ultimate
being the
Warrior.
top guy. Yeah, and they even had, Hogan do the job for him, which is so funny. He's just like, yeah, Andre did it for me. Then I knew I had to do it for Ultimate Warrior, even though he kicks out. Like I don't that wasn't part of it. Like he kicks out right after the 3 to make it seem like he like just lost, and like you don't really know. Did he do it in time? Exactly, it did.
Yeah, exactly.
Will it see its
Yeah.
shadow? If it sees its shadow this year, Hulk will only live 30 times.
Yeah,
Hulk will not
exactly.
take the pin.
Yeah. And and then because of the Iraqi sympathizer stuff, Bob Costas, well known type guy among sports analysts and sports media, he was actually doing like the opening like ring announcing for the previous WrestleManias, but then he said, I'm not doing it. He's like, this isn't the stuff, the wrestling I used to like, you know. And so he's kind of just being a baby about the whole Iraqi thing. And Vince is just like, hey man, like the hero, it's not like the Iraqi sympathizer won, like the hero did. So,
Yeah.
but fans were
Yeah.
in general souring now on the Hulkamania
Well, he was
bullshit and the
burning
babyface
flags and
gimmick.
stuff. So, like,
Yeah,
in certain areas, people are gonna get real upset about that. You know.
yeah.
The
So
silent
yeah.
majority.
So then Hulk is getting booed
Not
at
in New
shows and
Jersey.
stuff by
Sundown
some.
Town.
Yeah. So he's getting booed, and people are just tired of it. It happens with every baby face. Like eventually, you're just like, I'm fucking over it, dude. I'm tired of hearing about vitamins, doing my prayers, and fucking, you know,
Dookie.
and Dookie. So Vince, with the steroid stuff starting to ramp up a little bit, he decides, hey, why don't I do the World Bodybuilding Federation? And that folded pretty quickly, almost like instantaneously, because like it was just bodybuilders coming out to like fucking like wrestler theme songs, doing like poses and having to dance and stuff like on stage. And it was just like, all right, dude. And that was definitely a labor of love for him for sure. Because
Mhm.
I love the male physique, or whatever the fuck he says.
Yeah. Love
And
that for
Yeah,
him.
yeah, he
Anyway.
does.
yeah, I love that for you, Vince.
Anyway.
Um, and then WWF, they add they add a steroids free policy, and they make like little fucking commercials for it and for drugs too. And Vince says WWE is a place to come and watch drug free sports and entertainment for the whole family. And this is when he starts he's trying to push into the new generation era where it's all fluorescent colors that look like it's on the set of Saved by the Bell, and
Hell yeah.
push for, because he's like, whoa, look all this money we made off of merch, as Jason was saying, at 200 million. Like, so let's just focus on families and like the younger demographic. And yep, a lot of fans that were adults were starting to be like, what the fuck? And yeah, the steroid trial actually starts to kick off where, he's actually gonna have to go to court and everything. And Hulk at the time goes on Arsenio Hall, and that's where he famously lies about steroid use. And Vince told him, he's like, I told him not to do it. I told him not to do it, and if he did, just tell the truth. Because like then they can't hold anything against you. And then Hulk was like, yeah, it was a mistake. And it was like, yeah, it was a mistake because it was obvious, dog. But
Yeah.
should have listened to Papa Vinny.
Lying is
And
definitely Hulk Hogan's favorite thing to do,
yeah.
Besides
And
eating fettuccine Alfredo while
yeah,
people do karaoke.
he loves his revisionist history for sure. And he knows he gets into the mainstream a lot as far as some of his interviews and stuff he does. So like people who aren't everyday wrestling fans will literally probably believe a lot of this stuff. Like sometimes when we watch wrestling, like, oh yeah, Hulk Hogan, I know him. He was he was saying he always did the GOB for everybody. He tried starting the union for wrestlers, but Jesse the Body, he fucked him over. He ratted him out. And and then this goes like as this is going on, there's also sex scandals going on at the
Oh
same
wait,
time period.
before they get into
Oh,
that,
wait,
they
there's
talk
more.
about the death of Jimmy Snuka's girlfriend, Nancy Argentino, and basically how Vince kind of helped pay for his lawyer, helped kind of get him out of it, essentially.
Yeah, because they're like, we don't know what Vince did, but he must have done something. You know what I mean? As far as the
Yeah.
police down there. And Tony Atlas said, he was like, it was horrible the way we treated women. We abused the hell out of women and we treated them like toys. You know? So like, and he admits it, and he doesn't say I was not a part of that. He was just like, we were all fucking terrible to women at the time, and it was not a good place, not a good work environment for women or for ring boys. And
Yep.
the sex scandals kind of come up, and at that same time too, the fucking person in charge of hiring them, Phillips, he like molested the majority of them, or they weren't hired,
Mel
and
Phillips, yeah.
Mel Phillips, and then you also had Terry Garvin, who was involved in the
Was a
Ring Boy
wrestler.
scandals, and then you had Pat Patterson too, and they would offer them drugs and stuff like that, and they would obviously tell them it would be helpful for them if they did perverted stuff with them,
Yeah, and a
and
bunch of them are saying like, "Oh, well, Pat was like unfairly lumped in with the rest of them," but like,
yeah,
then
because
Tony
it's like,
Atlas is like, "Yeah, well, he grabbed my pecker, so
yep. And then they're like, "What?" I love the Netflix producers. Like, "Wait, what? What did you say?" He's like, "He grabbed my pecker," and they're like,
that's
"What?"
exactly what he
And he's
said." You
like,
know what I mean?
"Pecker." Yeah, because he says it in like his cool like Southern type accent. I think it
Yeah,
sounds Southern, right?
I
I
don't
think
know where
Yeah,
the
I
so.
hell
think
he's
it's
from.
Southern. Maybe
It's
like
so he has some type of cool accent. I don't know, but he he tells them,
Roanoke, Virginia.
Roanoke,
okay,
Virginia.
yeah. So that's
Good job,
they still have
Chris.
kind of Southern accents there in Virginia.
They got hit. Rest in peace from the hurricane.
Co Country road, take Tony Atlas home. But yeah, so Mel Phillips and Garvin are fired, and Pat Patterson resigns.
Blue Ridge
And
Mountain.
Vince told Meltzer that he was innocent and it was a gay witch hunt against Pat Patterson. And Pritchard says Pat's innocent, blah blah blah. And then, as you said, Tony Atlas comes in and says he was grabbing by the pecker in the locker room.
Not Pecker's
And
hard.
this leads
It's not
Vince to go
right.
on to the Phil Donahue show, to talk about these sex scandals and ring boy scandals. And we saw, Randy Orton's uncle is on that, Barry Orton. Dave Meltzer is on it too. And yeah, and so is what do you call it? Bruno Sammartino is there for it, and so is what do you call it? Hulk's fucking who's Hulk stole everything from.
Bubba the Love Sponge.
I don't
No,
know.
who Hulk got his entire gimmick from?
Superstar Billy Graham.
Billy Graham,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So he and they all just
You're
and
a
like
sick
it
man.
and like the Phil Donahue show just completely backfires on Vince, and they all just keep calling out allegations that Vince has no real like rebuttal to,
Yeah.
and like there's like this guy did this to me, he would fucking grab my dick, tell me to show me his dick, and like yeah, for anyone, they only show clips of it. Like if you're more interested in this, watch that entire Phil Donahue interview because yeah, you'll learn a lot of shit. And then the ref, Rita was her name. Rita,
Rita Chatterton. Yeah,
yeah,
she accused Vince of sexually assaulting her. And he addressed it too in the thing.
yeah, and he addressed it in a really creepy fucking way of saying that like, even if it was rape, the statute of limitations are out after 7 years anyway.
She's like, what
At
the
this
fuck,
point,
man?
it's just like if you didn't do it, why are you saying anything like that? Because like
Yeah.
apparently he forced like oral on her, and then like I guess the oral wasn't working for Vince, and then he made her like he ripped off her clothes and essayed her as she states, the victim states what happened, but they said not a lot of people cared. She was,
Yeah,
she went on like a lot of different news shows, and no one
she
really
went on
gave a shit.
Geraldo Rivera.
Yeah, and then Vince put a lawsuit against Geraldo because of that,
Yeah.
and yeah, and then it goes back to Phil Mushnick, because then the steroid trial starts ramping up a bit in '93, and Vince like blames him for all the scandals. He's like, Phil Mushnick was behind all of it, and it's just like, well, he was the only one reporting on it. But and then Vince goes in wearing the neck brace famously to try to, as they say, get a little compassion. We saw this with later on Bill Cosby going in like he's completely blind and like doesn't know where he is,
Harvey
and then
Weinstein with a cane.
yeah,
And
yep,
also on Curb Your Enthusiasm, the last season, Larry comes
yeah,
in with Jeff Garland's like wife in the show, Susie, and she's in a wheelchair.
yeah, garnering
Mm.
the compassion and empathy from the crowd, because make no mistake about it, folks, the courtroom is a dramatic theatrical performance from the prosecution and the defendant, and it's always been that
Yeah.
way, and public perception
Yeah.
is everything.
Yeah. It's like the
um
show Matlock. Anyway,
John
yeah,
Locke.
then it
yeah,
gets
so
into WCW
yep,
and
because Hulk,
Hogan
because Hogan
signing
leaves
over.
WWE because he's tired of getting booed by people, and he said he couldn't control the crowd anymore, and he told Vince, I'm leaving. He shakes hands and tells Vince, I won't go to competition, okay, I promise. But as we know, Hulk likes to lie sometimes, and hey,
Also, Hulk got out of the steroid trial because basically he probably like signed a deal with them and was like
with the
they
Fed said he would
probably
talk, yeah,
yeah
because they told him you'll face 17 years if you don't come and talk. But then when he did
yeah
talk,
because
he
I
did
guess they
not give
caught him
them
with
what.
drugs.
Yeah, but when he did talk, he did not give the feds what they wanted. And he just said, yeah, no, Vince never told us, tried to sell it to me or force any of us to take it. So then the feds are just like, wow, but we already signed that deal with you. So fuck. And Vince gets off because the steroid trial, like out of all like the controversies in this, like he was innocent of that. Honestly, that was kind of just stupid, the whole trial. And they
I
really should have been
mean,
focusing
it
on like
seems
the sexual
it
abuse and the ring boys and stuff, not the fucking steroids. If you
fair
want
enough.
to,
Yeah, but it
but
seems
early
like another one
'90s,
of those things where Vince would kind of be like, "Oh yeah, I don't care if you do that." You know what I mean? Oh, no one should be using steroids, but like the biggest guys that are big are gonna get the main event fucking, you know what I mean, spot.
yeah, yeah, but he wasn't like what the charges were is for it was saying like he was selling the steroids and painkillers to them and
Yeah.
like telling them they have to take them, which like yeah, it wasn't true.
Yeah, he probably just hired a guy to do that
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah, but the problem is in the early '90s, like even our federal government, when they were looking for a lawsuit like that, like of course they were more focused on like steroids and drugs rather than like sexual abuse of children or adults too. And I mean that goes with like really on point with like the '80s and early '90s up until whenever, about how this country felt about sexual abuse in general. It's
Yeah.
pretty shitty. You
Mhm.
can see that with the Menendez brothers. So early 90s, and yeah, people were just making jokes about
There's
sexual
also a
abuse on
Netflix
Saturday Night
special
Live.
about that.
Yeah, yep, and on
What's it
HBO
called?
Max.
It's too long.
So episode 3
It's like
ends
9
with
hours.
Well, episode 2 is
they
ending,
put up, yeah, or
and
that's what
it's
I
the
meant.
rise of
Episode 2 ends.
the
But wait,
rise
real
of
quick,
WCW.
at the end they put like a little message, and it was saying that he dropped the defamation case against Rita Chatterton in 1994, only to end up paying her millions of dollars in a settlement.
Yep, and now I think it was part of some of the hush money payments.
Yeah.
So early on, they added up the board of directors, and they're trying to oust him the first time. And yeah, the episode ends with the rise of WCW.
WCW.
Easy E, aka Eric Bischoff, pulls the same move that Vince did with Andre actually earlier in the episode. And Hulk at the time, he's on the set of Thunder in Paradise, another action TV movie he's doing. And Easy E goes to his trailer like in between takes and stuff. As he's filming that, and Hulk was like, "Yeah, I hated like Hollywood and stuff because I was just stuck in a trailer all day." It's like, no, you just hated having fucking poop movies coming out and getting critically panned over
Fart.
and over. Yeah, and you're as soon as your acting career began, it was already ending. But so and with Teddy Turner, the billionaire Ted, handing out guaranteed contracts, which WWF wasn't doing, and easier schedules and a ton of less appearances overall for these guys. Yeah, it was an easy sell to Hulk, and so I think he said something like, "I just need like 30 appearances from you a year or something," to like Eric in that. So yeah, and that takes out episode 2, and we sneak our way into episode 3, the screw job, the good old screw job, which
Which is like, I don't
yeah,
know if this needed a whole episode for.
no, no, and like up to this
Like,
point, these first 3 episodes, I don't think I think I can speak for all of us. There wasn't really anything new that we knew. Like there was no new information where like, oh
the
shit, I
only
never
like
knew
new
that.
information was like Tony Atlas saying that he did in fact, like Pat Patterson did in fact touch his pecker.
Yeah,
Well,
and
but so also what's interesting about this episode, I guess what they're trying to do with telling this story through the documentary for people that don't know shit about
Yeah.
Vince McMahon, it's like this is kind of when he really started putting his face and you know what
yeah,
I mean,
and
being
this is
the
kind of
character.
and this is kind of like the mixture of the screw job and like WCW rise and the new generation trying to get pumped off, and it just sucks. And but yeah, so like it starts off with showing his first screw job, which a lot of wrestling fans may forget about sometimes, with Wendy Richter, because she was becoming a problem because she wouldn't put anyone over to pass the title down. So she faces Spider, aka Moolah, who's dressed up in this creepy spider gimmick, and they do a quick 3 count for the first screw job. And even though her shoulder was up and it was really obvious, they just did 1, 2, 3.
1, 2.
And that's what probably gave Vince the idea. Is like, if I do this again, I just need to do it with like a submission or something different because that didn't work. And Vince said it's nothing personal, just business. His usual fucking moniker and quote he always gives everybody. And yeah, and they touch a little more on the steroid stuff, like we kind of talked in episode 2. I think we kind of just we hit all that, like a whole kind of just kind of ends up having his back in court enough to have him be not guilty. So once again, here we are where we find ourselves in most episodes. Vince needs a top guy again because now Hulk is gone. And so of course, naturally he says, "Yeah, I'm gonna push Lex Luger and send him to the fucking moon," which I like Lex Luger, but I don't
So
think
do
he
I.
really I don't think he had the charisma to really be like the number one guy of a company, Lex Luger.
Hmm.
But anyway, they did the Lex Express and they tried, and it basically fizzled out after like 6 to 8 months. And yeah, and I believe Lex was also a part of like the Bodybuilder Federation, like for a couple episodes. So Vince loved his hard body. Um, he likes his boys with hard bodies. If you want to be
Yikes.
one of my wrestlers, hey dude, he did. He was jacked, but in ring ability, 1.2.
Was it Scott Hall who had that great quote about Vince where he's like hiring him or no, he was doing the storyline with Goldust and he's like, let me tell you about my first homosexual experience.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was like a truck driver or something like that.
Huh? What was the quote? Who
Let me
said
tell
it?
you about
Scott
Vince
Hall.
Scott Hall?
McMahon. Vince McMahon was trying to help Scott Hall understand the Razor Ramon Goldust angle, where Goldust was like
Okay,
And make
touching
him
on
feel more,
his
he wanted to make him feel more comfortable about it.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
He said, "Let me tell you about my first homosexual experience."
Yeah. And that, yeah, so as Lex falls out of, falls out of the top spot, Bret Hart comes in and he said, and Bret Hart talks about himself in third person. He says, Bret Hart was the guy to pull the sword out of the stone,
Yeah.
and that's the beginning of the new generation era, which did finally see some
Pepsi,
newer
our new
homegrown
generation.
talent. Yeah, exactly. That's why Punk loved the new generation era so much.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the new
Wow.
generation era did start off with like a solid set of guys because they're still in the lead of WCW at this time. Um, with like new homegrown kind of talent. You had Razor Ramon, you had Shawn Michaels, you had Diesel, Kevin Nash, and you had Undertaker. And
The Undertaker.
and yeah, and they were very distinct characters, which like this era thrived off of. But great way to start out with like those four guys and Bret Hart. So like five really good workers and top guys, honestly. And Vince said, Bret didn't have all the charisma, but he had some and just enough to be a top guy and have the title. Which like I agree with. Like I wouldn't say like he oozes charisma, Bret Hart, but
Yeah.
he's
He
he
was
had
cool
but
though.
no, yeah, that's what I'm saying. He had enough and
Real
it made
cool
sense.
factor.
Yeah, and it made sense with his character. Kind of like, I thought his promos were always okay, Bret. You know, I thought you wouldn't say like he's the best on the mic or anything, but he was pretty sophisticated. I thought he got better and better throughout his career. And
Yeah.
personally, him as a heel was probably the best on the mic he ever was when he was just like shitting on the US and Vince and everything else. But yeah, but the WCW, they bring him back in because they're ramping stuff up because Ted Turner is just telling Easy E just fucking give him whatever big contracts you got to bring them in on guaranteed money. So then after that, like Macho Man comes in, and then WCW had like a Saturday night, WWE had like a Saturday night show, a weekend show of some kind. I don't know if it was Saturday or Sunday, but Lex was on that, and then the next Monday, Lex was on Nitro. And this is like kind of where Easy E goes into Ted Turner and says, like, listen, like, if you want us to beat these guys, like, I need fucking, they were on Saturday nights at 6:30. Like, how are you're not gonna get fucking ratings. You know what I mean? Like, being in that spot. So he's like, what do you need, Eric? And Eric's like, I need a Monday night spot. And he said, yep, give it to him. 2 hours Monday night. And the Monday Night Wars kicked the fuck off. And Eric's like, so everything that WWE was at the time was doing, I wanted to do different. I wanted to stand out. He's like, they were doing tape shows, so then we did live. They made their show more colorful, kiddie bullshit, and we wanted to make our shit real, And that's why they use a lot of the real names too, like Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. Like they wanted
Mhm.
to have more real feeling rather than these scary, characters that were, like the Bastion Boogers of the world and fucking the all the other weirdos and fucking guys that had looked like Cybertrons walk out. And then during this time period, you have Medusa show up and she throws a WWE Women's title in the garbage can right on TV. Um, and then Eric's like, I wanted to get under his skin, Vince. You know what I mean? Because he's so hard to, and I realized I did once he put out that whole campaign of the impressions of Hulk and Macho Man and everybody, where they're all making fun of them. And this also showed that Nash and Scott Hall were looking to go to WCW because when they were asked to like be a part of it, they're like, no, I don't want to do that because obviously they don't want to talk shit about the company they're going to. But it backfired. Like the USA Network was like yeah, you can't do this shit anymore. And it also just backfired too because it just kind of made them look dumb. And Ted Turner thought it was hilarious, so he wasn't even mad. Like they show him laughing at a TV. It's fucking funny. And that leads to the huge moment that Jim Cornette still cries about to this day, where the Clique does their goodbyes in the ring. They break kayfabe, and this was at a house show too. Anyway, but yeah, HBK asked Vince. Yes, and like that's what's fucked up to me is Shawn Michaels asked Vince if they could do that, and he got his blessing. And
Mhm.
then then the curtain call happens, and it's so fucked up because it's but before that, besides Cornette hitting it, goes to Taker and Brett, and they're like, we hated it, and that changed the business forever. Even though kayfabe was
For
already dead at this point.
forever.
Yeah, and then Shawn Michaels comes in. And he's like, dude, kayfabe was dead at this point. It was time to fight, and like people knew wrestling, like that the endings were fixed. So like, why don't we just move into the future instead of playing fucking make believe like it's not happening? And
Mhm.
so and then all the boys are riled up about this. So Vince, even though he fucking told Shawn it was okay, he goes to Triple H and he said, "You're gonna have to take heat for it, and you're not winning the King of the Ring anymore." So Stone Cold actually gets that King of the Ring W, and which is good because I ended up starting the Stone Cold era. But Vince's quote to Triple H was, "You're going to learn how to eat shit and like the taste of it."
And there was another quote
uh,
later on that was similar. He says something. Vince says something
Yeah.
about sometimes you're gonna have to eat some caca. And I was like, what?
yeah, he does say caca. Yeah, he's into poo poo. He's in.
What the
That's
hell?
It's clear he's into poop language and poo poo in general. Doo doo, diarrhea.
Doo-doo.
And then yeah, National Hall leave after that and get fucking fire ass contracts. And they start the invasion angle. He
Whoa.
of WWE. And yeah, Titan starts suing WCW, like saying that like his character is too close, like Razor Ramon and something like. So he just had to be Scott Hall because he did kind of talk like Razor Ramon when he first came on screen. It was creepy, and then he kind of like when he does the first NWO thing where Hulk hits the fucking big leg and joins them, and yeah, and it's just funny because Vince is like cutting these babyface promos on TV, like and also in interviews saying how like you know Ted Turner is this big bad millionaire who's trying to hurt this family, this little family owned business, and raided their talent. And when, and this is exactly what Vince did previously in the 80s to all the different territories. Literally raided all their talent, destroyed, outdid family businesses because he had more money. And, but then Vince is like, and then they ask him, like, what, like, how are you any different? And he's like, well, you can think I'm a hypocrite, but Ted was doing it to hurt someone, and I wasn't doing it to hurt someone. It was just business. So
Mhm.
okay, okay, and then the NWO is formed, and this is what really kicks off that fucking 83 weeks because they're making great TV while WWE's fucking doing Teletubbies, which great show, but you're not going to get the 18 to 34 demographic. I'm sorry.
83
Um,
weeks with Eric
and
Bischoff.
yeah, and the
Yeah,
heel turn is
they made that
insane.
known. Eric Bischoff in the episode.
I know. I wonder if he said it in that. I was trying to remember if he mentioned that. And then it's funny, like, dude, the his heel turn Hulk was fucking amazing, dude. Like, and how like that one guy like runs they show like the one fan trying to get into the ring, and Kevin and Scott just start stomping him out, and security comes and pulls him away with their own cups and shit in the ring and everything else. And then and Vince even admits he's like the heel turn was done perfectly, and Hulk then calls out WWE and Vince in his first NWO promo, and Vince did take that personal, you know,
Mhm.
and he took that very personal, even though his classic phrase of "it's just business, not personal," it didn't work there. And of course, when it comes to the huge heel turn, they cut to Cody Rhodes, who of course highlights how amazing this is and all this stuff, and I think personally foreshadowing because he says this is the greatest heel turn in history, and like I don't like bit something effective. I don't know if it can be done again like this, and it's just like yeah, it can be Cody, and
It
you're
was
gonna be
also
the guy to
crazy
do
though,
it,
because
Homelander.
I was in the crowd for that. I was 11.
Yeah,
Yeah, but Macaulay Culkin was in the crowd and he didn't do anything, so he didn't become a
I
pervert.
yeah. Cody, and then 83 weeks, 83 weeks podcast, 83 weeks WCW on WWE, 83 weeks.
84
I just have to make
weeks.
sure I said it at least half the times Eric did. And it's crazy. They it was dope. The one footage they showed that was cool was Eric auditioning for WWE to like be like a
Bro.
backstage interviewer announcer back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
back in the early 90s. And Vince is like, yeah, I don't remember it. Sorry. She probably didn't. I mean, he like how many people, I'm sure he's had like try out for things, and it's showing the thing. He didn't really stand out that much. But the former pocket knife salesman that went door to door, Eric Bischoff. But
Whoa.
Come on.
and then it goes to Vince telling Brett he gave him a 20-year contract before this to try to, because he was all scared because he's losing all his talent, and he's like, I don't want to lose Brett. And then he realizes that fuck, I don't think I should have gave Brett this big contract, and I can't really afford it currently because they were actually losing money. They had years of money lost now, WWF. Where like at the end of the year, like they were negative money for a couple years is what they said in it. And Vince literally told Brett, he said, listen, I can't afford you. Here's, and they showed him where all the loopholes were in his contract, and to give him leverage and to use that to get a big deal from WCW and be able to like get him out of it, and WCW not knowing that like Vince knows and stuff. So Vince did help him set him up on that path to get more money, because then he got like 2.5 million or something like that a year, something like that, Brett, and like guaranteed money. So, and then so this cuts finally to the screw job the whole episode led up to, like, because it just touched on at the beginning, and then was a WCW episode for the most part, and then it goes with Brett saying Sean was a real dick at the time, and and which he definitely was, Sean, because it cuts to Sean, him saying like he's saying, yeah, I was a fucking prick. He didn't say fuck because but he said I was
Yeah.
a prick, and it shows like Brett doing the or Sean doing the promo saying about sunny days and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And Brett was a married man, all right, and it was just funny because total gaslighting, because Sean was the one hooking up with Jason's favorite, Sunny, and
Sunny Kiss?
Nope.
Sunny Days?
Yes.
yep, sunny
Oh.
days, sunny days, only a day you I away.
That's
Um,
not how it goes, dude.
but yeah, and then
Yeah, that's how it goes.
and then obviously the fucking it comes down to Brett saying he doesn't want to give up the title in Canada. He said I'll come in and do it on a Raw, and Vince is like, no, dude, like you gotta drop it. And then Vince eventually just lies to him and says we're gonna do a schmaz finish, which a schmaz finish is like just when everyone goes into the ring and there's a DQ and all different sides start beating the shit out of each other, and they just end it like that. And Brett agreed to that, but he was prepared to have a real fight if he had to, is what he said in the ring, if Sean tried any shit. And so they agreed to that, and yeah, and Triple H said he was on that phone call with Vince, and it was his idea. Like when him, Sean, and Vince were talking about like, because he's like, "Fuck that, dude! Like he's got to listen to you. He's got to put the title over before you got to put Sean over before he leaves." Because I agree. Like you can't just say fucking no. You know what I mean? Like no, I'm not doing that. It's just like what? Like you realize this is a television show. You're an athlete, but also an actor, and you're part of. You're getting paid a lot of money. So like, yeah, you got to do it. Um, but I understand guys like being against super creative and stuff, but like when it comes to like wins and losses, like even if you don't think it's right, like you can fight against it, but at the end of the day, you gotta do it. You gotta do the
Mhm.
job when it's asked of you. Um,
Yeah.
so it
Brett
comes
definitely
down to it.
has he definitely has a big ego, but it's like also he comes from a different kind of
Bro,
mindset maybe
they were
than
in
like
Canada.
Yeah,
exactly than to want to
yeah,
just be like, I don't know. Yeah, let me deal with this fucking billionaire. You know what I mean? At that time, maybe
yeah.
millionaire.
Well,
I don't
well,
know.
he even says Brady even says too. He like Vince is like a father figure to him and stuff, and like they had a very close relationship. You know, because Vince, like, you know, because
Yeah.
Brett did like Vince. You know, like
They all have Stockholm syndrome.
yeah, 100%, dude. Stockholm syndrome and daddy problems. Vince is for sure like Charles Manson, for sure.
Yeah.
This fucking typical cult leaders. Let me get these fucking daddy issues peeps to listen to everything I say. So dude, it's funny when they're doing the screw job and like Vince is telling the timekeeper to ring the bell and the timekeeper like looks at him and like initially isn't ringing it. And then Vince screams, "Ring the fucking bell!" And like Brett said he could actually hear Vince say that. And Vince says like, "Yeah, I wanted to be at ringside so Brett could see that I took back what was mine." That was his quote in it, which I wanted to look right in his face when I did it. And then Brett famously breaks apart like the fucking announce tables, slams the like the monitors, does the WCW sign in the ring, and this part was like fucking sad. Like, and he tells him, and they show you on video, like he kind of calms down. Owen goes up to him, and Owen is telling him, he's like, "Listen, dude, like, what happened is wrong, but you have all the respect of everyone in the back, and like, you know, just know that, and you're fucking, you know, you're better than this. Like, don't go on his level." And when Brett's talking about this and like he's like, "Yeah, he calmed me down," like Brett starts like breaking down and like crying a bit and like because you don't really I don't know many interviews where I've seen him Bret Hart cry, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, and he's talked about Owen a bit and like doesn't you know, and like yeah, it was I was like that was pretty fucked up. And they show the famous bit of Bret Hart's wife talking shit to Triple H backstage and then Brett asking Sean, you know, and Sean being like, "I had no idea, dude. I had no idea." And Sean also says like, "Vince was like my only father that I've ever known, so no matter what he told me to do, I would do." You know, like all of them say that like the same thing for the most part about him being like their dad. And then Vince goes to get punched out by Brett and says he went in there with his, you know, with his arms down to give him an open shot. And then other people are like, "Yeah, no, that's a lie. Like they wrestled for a bit before it happened. Like they tussled."
They
And
lock
then
up.
yeah, and then he fucking hit him with like a Street Fighter. Yeah. Hit him with like a fucking Street Fighter punch. And that was the end of episode 3. Episode 4 was Attitude. Because the Attitude Era began, baby. And this is where
Yeah.
they start out with Vince's favorite wrestler growing up. You were waiting
Dr.
for this
Jerry
moment.
Graham.
Dr. Jerry Graham. He would light a cigarette with a $100 bill on fire to light it, like a lit $100 bill to light his
What a
cigs.
genius.
And he got his
I want to see
strut
the
from
Young
him.
Bucks do that.
Yeah, he got his strut from him too. Like, and obviously over exaggerated it. And Vince said at the time when he was a fan of him when he was younger, he dyed his hair blonde too to be like him. And it's crazy because he said when he was young in the business, he took him under his wing and they would drive around. And he's like, he would drive around like a psycho. But Vince dug it. And then they kind of just cut to the beginning of Evil Vince and the Brett screwed Brett, and the massive heat he had everywhere, which he took advantage of. And Bruce Pritchard says the distinctive moment to start the Attitude Era was when Sean went out with the gauze pads stuffed in his undies, and Vince didn't like it. He said it was disrespectful and tried to fine him 10 grand.
It was, dude.
And then 3 to 4 weeks later, Vince got over it and said, "Yeah, that's Attitude. We need that attitude." And that's what kind of began it. And that's what's kind of cool because like early on, like you know, you got Shawn Michaels and like Triple H like fighting like we need to change this fucking product. And out of any wrestlers, they're the ones that had its ear, you know, and like they're like, "Come on, dude, like this can be fucking we need to do what they're doing over there, but even better," you know, and that's when DX happens and you know, Vince kept saying, "Don't fucking do that." You know, USA is pissed off because they kept doing like wild shit where they were talking about wieners and mooning their butts.
Telling girls.
And then Vince, yeah, and then
crazy.
Vince realized that the 1834 demo was going through the roof, and he's like, "All right, yeah, keep doing that, and then some." You know, and then he was just open to all their ideas, which
Boobies.
brought such a huge part of the Attitude Era. It's such a creative era because a lot of the wrestlers had the chance to like use their own creativity. Vince was a little more open to it, you know, like having them kind of come up with things and starting to use more real names now. And then hence Stone Cold Steve Austin, who at the time left WCW and started his character in ECW. Paul Heyman gave him that chance, and doing some matches and just absolutely killing it, and it led to the King of the Ring, and one of the first matches in it, he fought Mark Marrow, and Mark Marrow gave him 14 stitches to his mouth. So he had to take an ambulance out, get stitched up. He comes back, and that's when off the top of his dome, he just, because someone told him when he was coming back, like, yeah, Jake cut his promo on you. And he's like, oh, what do you say? He's like, it was like a religious promo. That's kind of what his character was doing. So after he beat him, that's when he said, Austin 316 just said he whooped your ass. And then another line he used, he never used before, he ended it with, and that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so. And so Vince was just like, creaming in his panties backstage, and it was just like, fuck, dude. Because at first he's like, I was a little worried about the whole religious thing because that'd have backfire. But then when he ended it with, that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so, he's like, yeah, we knew we got a fucking star that day.
Yeah.
And then literally the next night, people had Austin, because they had a Raw the next day, and that was the King of the Ring pay-per-view, and people already had a bunch of Austin 316 signs, which I guarantee most of those were probably plant signs. You know what I mean? Because that is very fast after. Some of them probably were real because it was over very fast. But like, I'm sure a lot of the front row ones were, we're pushing on that. And then we saw like the merchandise of WWE, WWF at the time going through the fucking roof again, like it was in the early 90s. But this WrestleMania coming up, he needed someone, it was Austin versus Shawn, but he needed Iron Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet. And it's really funny. For this part, they cut to Stephanie in 2013, and she's like, Mike hadn't been arrested for like rape yet, right? When we worked with him.
Oh yeah.
And yeah. And it's just like, it was like after he already got out of prison for it. It was like a couple of years after, because I think he went to prison around 93 and got out like 95, 96, something like that. Or yeah. And so it's just kind of funny that they went back to like a previous interview with her just to like show that, like, put the point across that, like, they gave Mike one of his first opportunities out of prison, which, he did his time. I know that whole case, that's a different podcast. There's a lot of different theories and weird stuff with Mike Tyson and being arrested, but I don't think Vince really cared about any of those charges, especially because they've been flung his way before too. So yeah, the HBK and Stone Cold match was nothing to call home about, but they had Mike Tyson, and it was one of like the biggest, much watched pay-per-views, of all time up to that point. I don't know if it got those numbers of the most watched or anything, but I'm sure it was top 5. And not because the pay-per-view era wasn't even going on that long anyway at that point. So, and then it really began. It kicked off this era of anti-heroes, and society had a tougher edge at the
This
time, and
ain't
they wanted.
WWE.
Yeah, and it was bad, because now it was like bad guys and then the worst guys, which AEW kind of does now, which I like. That's one thing I liked about AEW is like their baby faces are still kind of like heels,
Yeah.
And it's cool. I love the fucking anti-heroes. Like, you can't tell me Hangman Page isn't an anti-hero right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's always
This man was pushed.
angle.
Yeah. He's in like a Jason Statham movie right now where he was pushed too hard and they fucked with his family, and he's a man on fire like Denzel, dude, and you're not going to stop him. And that's why he burned houses down. So, but yeah, I was going to make sure AEW came into this. It's important. But then, at this time too, with Stone Cold rising, like, to have him be at the level he was at, he had the greatest heel ever, to do storylines with, which was Vince McMahon, and which I think you can make the argument that he's the greatest heel of all time, right?
Ice Hole.
Well, Isol said he's going to go back to being a babyface.
Oh fuck! Then yeah, Vince.
Yeah, but no one really has enough money to offer him yet. He's turned down Tony Khan, he turned down Vince, now he's turned down Tripp. So
He doesn't turn down ECPW though.
Yeah, ECPW
No.
is the only place that can afford him.
No, that's a labor of love. you know,
True.
ECPW. It's like his dojo.
It's the house that Icehole built.
Yeah. And it is the house Icehole built. And shout out to Icehole. We miss you. We love you. And whenever you're ready to come back to the wrestling industry, you know where to come. Invasion Angle. But it goes back to Vince's childhood again. He grew up poor, and he just talks about how he like this is like the character is based off of. Like he wanted to make it someone that he really hated, like the rich people he would say that felt like they were better than you and they can intimidate people because of their money and their power. And yeah, but it's just kind of seemed like that's who he had become anyway, the people he hated. And that's kind of what happens. People turn into, you know, the kind of the villains they hated. They do those things back until they become them.
He did
And we
Judas in his mind.
Yeah, and this was brought up. Do you guys think Stone Cold and Vince McMahon is the greatest wrestling feud in history? I would agree with that. With the way the money it made, the
Yeah,
how it literally took over
it is a
83
good
weeks.
one. I don't know if I would agree, but I think it is a good one.
Paul London,
I was-
Brian Kendrick versus Deuce and Domino.
Hey, I mean, you don't have to. Okay, you don't have to one up me, dude, with that
Raven,
shit.
Yeah, come
I don't know,
on.
Raven and Dreamer, isn't that like a big one? Or Raven and Sandman?
You gotta fucking smart mark me now. What are you gonna bring up next, dude?
Um,
Brother
see.
Love versus someone.
versus Cody's Love.
Yeah, Stardust and Kofi Kingston. How dare you?
Shane McMahon versus Triple H in real life.
Dude, we need that cage match.
It's a
But
real
yeah,
life feud.
all this shit ended the 83 weeks. And yeah, Eric said Vince, you know, took all his stuff, but he took all of his stuff, but like Vince took all of his stuff and ended up making it better though. And he said, I can't argue with that. And Vince said Eric said if he thinks he was the first evil owner, fine, but he did it better than him. Because Eric was doing like that gimmick, you know. And then it goes into Dorky Maivia, you know, and everyone hated him, and then he joins the Nation of Domination. So now you have
Yeah, blah,
a
blah, blah.
second biggest guy coming up. And the timelines of these episodes must have driven wrestling fucking marks crazy because like they just make it seem like the Austin and Rock thing just like happened overnight, and like both of their characters just happened overnight. Like they don't show Austin when he first came in to WWE as like the fucking Ted DiBiase's new boy as the stuff. Yeah, it's like yeah, holding $1 million belt and doing that dumb gimmick, like the $1 million man or whatever the fuck it was. And yeah, and then like so it goes to The Rock also. I don't remember this footage, seeing it before. He spoke at the 2000 Republican National Convention. He hosts SNL. And then it had more viewers than Monday Night Football and the World Series baseball during this time period, which is insane to fucking quantify. Like most people, normal people, you told them that now, they would be like, they wouldn't be able to believe you until you show them the stats on it. Hey Tony, get me the stats. You're the stats guy. But yeah, and it shows Phil Mushnick. He comes in and he cries about Attitude Era being too much adult content, like a pussy. And it's like, dude, focus on like the other dark stuff of WWE. The content was what everyone wanted. Okay, give us the puppies. It was what the culture was asking for at the time. Because yeah, it was a pervert culture. What can you do? The late '90s, early thousands, where TV was perverted, you know, all across it. And wrestling has always been a reflection of what's going on in the culture and in media across the time periods. And
this ain't the Montreal screw job.
Yeah, and then you got like DX saying like stuff like stop your grinning and drop your linen, and like the whole exploitation of women during this time period is obviously fucked up.
Like Stephanie.
Well, Stephanie was down for all of
daughter.
it. Yeah, I mean, she was down with everything. And then
Except for
they
the
go
pregnancy angle.
Yeah, she
That
turned
was
that
funny.
down.
That was so funny the way they edited that. They're like, yeah, I don't really want to talk about it, and then it cuts immediately to Vince talking and laughing about it.
Yeah. And then, dude, Vince is like, at the time saying it's, you know, it's still family friendly, and said that there was no one that like died,
Oh, he's a
used
fucking idiot.
knives. Yeah, he said no one that died, used knives, guns, or were raped or any of
And
that. And then they cut to every single one. And he's like, "You're a rapist."
And they even
Coming
showed the part where they're choppy Val Venus.
Yeah, penis off because
pee-pee.
they use knives, and then they show
Mhm.
Brian Pillman with the gun. Even David Schultz, we were talking earlier on, when he shoots the gun and fucking during the
Mhm.
interview, like, and then Vince blows himself up and dies, before the
That was pretty
Benoit thing
cool.
happened. Yeah, and they talk about Sable because that's another issue that came up. Like Sable, eventually she was the hottest segment on television as far as most viewers, right behind Stone Cold at that
Mhm.
time. And this dude, I don't care what anyone says, the Sable Bomb was fucking dope. All right, and like she had cool finishers at least, and she did like Mark Merrow's like TKO move or the KO wherever he called it, for a bit too, and it would look cool. Um, but yeah, women, like those women are having the highest rated segments, and like because then you're bringing other women in that were they were doing the bra and panties matches and all the fucking weird pervert stuff back then, and but at the same time, most of them, they fucking it's not like they were against it, but they did want to actually probably try to wrestle and do significant stuff, you know.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
yeah,
Just to, I only have 10 minutes left. Just to let you know, we still like 2 episodes.
yeah, we do. Well, this ends episode 4, and
Mhm.
it's Owen Hart, and Brett says he that Vince was humiliating during this time period, and Vince was like, I don't know why he say that. I was trying to make him a star, and then he had him doing the blue blazer stuff, and Brett was on the flight and he said he just knew something was up and something bad wouldn't happen. And then yeah, they actually showed some of the pics of him in the ring too, like a more clear one. You always still like the classic like
The
shitty
Yeah.
blood in the ring
cloud
too.
one. Yeah, they actually showed that. That was something new, for me at least. And they did, then JR does the Owen Hart's died. And the live audience didn't really know what happened completely because it was in between stuff. And yeah, so Vince was like, let's continue the show. I have to do that as a businessman. And even though there's and like people are wrestling, like the next match, Jeff Jarrett's wrestling in there, and like a bunch of them are really good friends of Owen Hart, and they're having to rest
Yeah.
like they just found out he died and they're having to wrestle minutes later, looking at the blood in the fucking ring still. And someone asked him like if Shane splattered on the mat. I think Brett said that. If
Yeah.
Shane
Mhm.
splattered on the mat and Vince said
Vince
that,
was choking up.
do you think Vince would have, had the show continue, And then and Brett at first said he thought he murdered him to get back at him, but then the Kansas City police, one of the police detectives called Brett and said it was an accident, it was a defective device, and WWE sued that company that made
Mhm.
those
Yeah,
harnesses.
the episode closed with a message saying Martha Hart, Owen's wife, settled her lawsuit against WWE in 2000. It was also stated the company settled their own lawsuit with the manufacturer of the harness in 2003.
Yeah.
That starts with episode 5.
Yeah, and one last thing Vince said about that was like he wouldn't answer the question about Shane, but he said if that was me that fell in the ring and died, I'd want them to continue the show.
Yeah.
So episode 5, the family business.
Yeah. It starts with Heyman talking about McMahon's childhood.
Yeah, he said he was
And
always racing. He was always like racing against his childhood abuse, and he wanted to be in a situation where he was in control and untouchable.
yeah.
Because he grew up with his stepdad abusing him, his mom sexually abusing him,
Yeah, they
and
touch on the abuse of his mother.
Vince says, and this is where Vince says, there was incest and infighting within his family that happened. And I feel like they, don't really talk to him too much about like the abuse of his mom, but he probably said, I don't really want to go into that much.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So let me just rapid fire some points. Let me take over real
yeah,
quick, if that's cool, John. So the
yeah, go for it.
storyline about the real relationship of Triple H and Stephanie was covered. She was saying it was weird that he asked her to do some of the stuff that he had her do on screen. And Shane was also apparently against the idea of Stephanie and Triple H dating, but Vince apparently was trying to like be
Yeah,
the
he said he was a good
matchmaker for
guy.
them.
Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
good
I think
guy.
I think
Good hard body.
Shane probably knew that like his if he ever wanted to inherit the company that like Triple H was going to get in the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because then he's got him
True.
and Steph. Because now he was just going against Steph. Now he's going against Triple H and Steph.
Yeah.
And Triple H, and he liked Triple H's idea because they had no idea where they were going with like the Tess and Stephanie thing. Like they were gonna have the like get married, and then they didn't really know after that. And Tripp's like, "Hey Vince, what if I, show up at the bachelor party, put a Mickey in her drink, and then go through a drive-through
What the
wedding?" And then and Triple H says he consummated the marriage too,
Multiple times.
while she was had a Mickey slip to her.
Yeah,
And
that's not right.
and then the crowd after that was all calling her a slut when she came back after she was
So fucked up.
fucking drugged. So then they just
Roofied,
used that,
literally.
yeah, and they made her. So then the crowd just made her a heel. But that also shows where we're at in like the late '90s and early thousands with our country and sexual abuse and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
it's fucking sad, honestly. Like that's how I felt, pretty sad about it.
Vince booked himself against Stephanie in a street fight 6 days before her real wedding. And Linda was
Yep.
like, if she's harmed, like has a black eye or whatever, like I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah.
Triple H cheating on China was never mentioned with Stephanie.
China. And then, but dude, the reason why though,
that is weird. They didn't mention her at all.
Yeah. And the reason why Vince made her do the match against him, hardcore match against him, 6 days before the wedding, is because he asked her to do their actual wedding on television on the next pay-per-view. And she said no. She turned it down, and Vince said, "You're selfish." And then that's why he booked that. And Linda's like, I told Vince I'd kill him if she had a fucking black eye or something. And yeah, it's the McMahon family soap opera. Then you have Linda on TV, and Vince is like, she's not a good actress, and that's probably why he made her a comatose, over medicated
she was
Linda Engel.
uncomfortable. She was probably the least comfortable in the family on TV, But Vince was like laughing as he's talking about like making out with Trish Stratus in front of Linda in the wheelchair.
Her comatose body.
Yeah. She apparently was pitching a lot of the ideas with him to make the story better. I don't know. But yeah, they spent a lot of time on this feud. All four members of the family spoke about it, mostly in a positive light.
Yeah, well, that's what's funny. Vince said no one in the family had a problem with it. They cut to Shane. Shane's like, I had a problem with it, and anything with my mom like was off, out of bounds for me. And Vince says, well, Shane's a bit more conservative.
Well, yeah, and then also we mentioned Sable, but Vince claimed he didn't know anything about the lawsuit, and then he's like, "Oh, she came back and worked for me."
Dude, which was insane. He's like, I don't remember anything about it. It's like you settled the lawsuit, and then she came back and you gave her a job, and then you made her be your new fucking side piece on air, and then just had her making out with you and doing weird stuff again.
Yeah.
And
then they start talking about some of the, issues they had, like XFL he made and it folded like immediately after that season. They had to change the name from WWF because of the World Wildlife Foundation. And then it moves into the ruthless aggression era. John Cena was
take the
guy.
E out, get the F out.
Yeah, get the F out. There you go.
Well, Mania 17, take the E out. That's what
That's what they said about Fish. I don't even know.
Easy
a joke.
There you go.
Yeah, but Mania 17, Shane and his dad, Vinny Mac wrestled, and he was like, he's like, I don't want to hit you, Dad. Like, I don't. And so like when they got in the ring, Vince like dolloped him, as they said it, like with a bunch of huge slaps, and he's just like, oh, what the fuck? I guess so. And like it brings Shane back to his story when he was a kid, when he was like wrestling with his dad, and his dad would cheat and like grab his the meat on his rib cage because that fucking hurts, and then like punch him in the balls and pull his hair and shit. And he's like, sometimes in life you gotta cheat to win and get success. That's what I do in life. I cheat to win. I cheat and I win. And yeah.
But yeah, that episode ended with Shane leaving WWE and all of that stuff, and how Vince declined to buy UFC. What a fucking idiot, dude. What a fucking idiot, dude. Anyway.
Yeah. And the Sable thing was funny too, because they also been saying it was a blur to him and he doesn't remember it. When she came back on air, they literally do a segment with Steph saying, Steph saying she sued our company for sexual harassment for millions. Yeah. and then
Okay,
she has an affair. Yeah.
it's time for the final episode.
Yeah, and speaking on the Sable stuff a little bit more too, like in a 2001 Playboy interview, he spoke about having different affairs, Vince, and
Yeah,
a lot of people say that one of the
so
affairs was
bizarre.
probably with Sable, and like
Yeah.
'cause the
It's
most people
bizarre
dating
that
it.
he spoke on it though in that
Yeah,
like magazine they were saying.
yeah, and he did it on like, and then he like they were saying like this is another instance of like him having an affair with her on air of like things he's doing in his real life. He just puts it on air. It's like it's fake. You know what I mean? It's fake.
Yeah.
Like if I'm doing
Well,
it
and
on here, it's not real.
that's before we get into this final episode, that's the thing that he released, that like press thing saying essentially like they did like basically talking about the documentary like I don't stand by anything that they say, like they
Yeah,
skewed it
we
and
heard what you say, dog.
yeah, and what they're saying is like what he was saying in that press release was like they don't understand the difference between my character and the real me. So
Yeah, and he's the one always
it's
blurring those
clear
lines. Yeah,
it's clear
'cause-
that like he's the director, he's the writer, he's the
yeah,
showrunner.
and he always brings the reality to it. So like the things he's actually doing, he shows them on screen. He's like, see, it's fake. That's a character. I don't really do that stuff. And it was like a
Yeah.
way to like kind of push people away from what he actually was doing. And so I mean, shit's hot as fuck. Obviously, at Attitude Era, it's at its peak, as we were saying, beating Monday Night Football, beating the World Series, and WWF. Now WWE, they go public.
Yeah.
As a
The
publicly
stock
traded
exchange.
company, they open up a casino and restaurant. They open a casino and they open the restaurant bar in Times Square too.
Yeah.
And all of these folded pretty fast over time, just like the XFL, which you were mentioning, because at this time, that's
Yeah.
when the XFL starts, and also during this time, Vince buys WCW for 2.5 million, which still blows me away. I always knew that number, but I was just like, how the fuck did he get WCW and all their rights, everything, for $2.5 million? Like I feel like if Hulk Hogan or Eric Bischoff or anybody else knew about that, could have gotten that company for 2.5 million, they would have done it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but Vince somehow, like, I don't know. Like there's obviously some like I remember watching a
The
Dark Side of the
WCW
Ring,
with the
yeah,
old
episode,
WCW.
and they like Eric Bischoff kind of like says something about like there being like friends between the networks or whatever, and like the
Yeah.
one guy was a D head but kind of knew someone over at WB, and like they let this deal go in for cheap as fuck because of it. And because Eric
Yeah.
Bischoff was trying to buy the company, and like they, or at least keep running the show or anything, and they just did that and got rid of it. And that's when famously they did the simulcast of Nitro and Raw at the same time, going back and forth. And Vince and Shane showing, it starts out with Vince saying that he bought the company, and the entire, he had the entire wrestling universe now. And and then great ratings starting out for the XFL too. Like they had insane ratings to start out, and it was fun to watch. I had season tickets to that
Yeah.
season, but then it fell off because the game, like he didn't have good enough players in the league. Like it fell off because the gameplay was rough to watch, because it was. You had a lot of
Yeah.
like low quality shitty players, and it was really funny. Bob Costas, like I've known him so much over the years because of
Said the F
sports.
word so many
Yeah, him saying
times.
the F word was like, I was almost uncomfortable. It's like, Bob, you don't
Yeah.
talk
It's
that
kind of
way.
funny.
Stop it. Because he's like, I didn't give a fuck when he's talking about the XFL. But yeah, after week one, the ratings went down by 75%. And, and then he starts, then it ends. And as you said, WWF becomes WWE and they get the F out.
Yeah.
And they got WCW now, and they didn't really go into how that invasion angle fucking failed because they didn't
Yeah.
have like top WCW talent. They just didn't do it the right way either, and the payoff was fucking shit. And
Yeah.
but Vince brings back Hogan, and with the idea of having faced the Rocket Mania, and Vince in this says that he he wanted to choke him, like talking about Hogan, but you can't hold grudges in business and eat a nice plate of caca and swallow your pride.
Yeah. There you
Yeah, so that's
go.
just like
There it is.
He's all about the poop, you know. I don't know what the fuck it
So
is.
bizarre. I
And
mean,
then we get and then we get the Hulk versus Rock match, which we watched that live on pay-per-view on that or the living room TV that was like also like in
made
like
of wood.
glued into like a wood cabinet center,
Yeah,
and it's just
classic.
fucking tube TV that just and it had like a little bit of like the top in certain areas were a little fucked up from
Yeah,
us like throwing shit at it and stuff.
leaving
And
drinks on it.
yeah, of course. I cut my ear in half on that TV. It
Oh,
didn't move an inch because Alex pushed me after we were doing spins to get dizzy, and I had no balance, and she decided to cut it right in half.
gotcha.
But I didn't feel it because it cut
Gotcha.
through the nerves. So I
Ouch.
still have that scar. Yeah, she had me get
Yeah.
color the hard way that day.
Yeah. Well, speaking of ear injuries, are we ready for the next episode? The final episode?
We're almost there, but we still have some episode 5 left.
Well, I'll just say this because it's not super important, just kind of an aside. That episode starts with clips from WrestleMania 23 and Trump's involvement and stuff. And they talk about how Linda is involved in his cabinet, how politics are basically wrestling now, and how the drama and like shock value stuff like plays into our culture, and how he
Yeah,
kind
at
of
the
had a
highest
hand in that.
levels. Yeah, at the highest levels of
Yeah.
media and like politics is kayfabe, dude.
Yeah.
You know,
Scary.
it's constantly blurring the line, and reality TV is kayfabe. It's like we're surrounded by tons of it, but like there's so many people still think it's real, and that's why I talk to people about politics. It's like wrestling isn't real. Like, so why do you believe all politics and stuff when they're just they're just trying to cut promos that were given to them or written for them and stuff. Like all of them, doesn't matter what party, what level of politics. It's just and that goes for like the watching Righteous Gemstones and like them making the comparisons of like the super churches and
Yeah.
wrestling, and like how
Yeah.
it's the same fucking cutting promos out there and like
It's all
it's
big work.
it's all intertwined. It all starts with the carnival and the carnies, dude.
Yeah.
The foundation of
That's
like
why
this country is the carnival.
it's cool they link McMahon to modern day PT Barnum so many times, because
Yeah,
it's
because it's
true.
true.
He wasn't a
Yeah.
great guy either, he did a lot of
No, none of
pretty
them were, dude.
exploitative things.
Dude, the carny life in general and the way a lot of them are treated, is the same way wrestlers are treated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Working like all the time, always on the road. In their cases, usually fucking taking trains and yeah, they're all exploited. A lot of them that had, like the bearded woman, the dude, when we went our own experience going to that like carnival at
Yeah.
in East Rutherford, one of the most disturbing experiences of my life that
Yeah.
made me
Where
so
we
fucking
also saw
sad.
WrestleMania,
Yeah, it made me so sad. They have this carnival set up where you walk in and you see like
the
these,
world's
these
smallest
weird,
woman.
and they say that and at first you're seeing all things that are like fake, and then you get
Yeah.
to the end and you realize no, that's a real person. It's just this little woman that's like set up in like this little bed thing just, and she's like just not really talking and just like staring, and you're
She
just like you walk
waved.
up, yeah, waved, and you're just like, what the fuck, dude? Like
Yeah.
this is still going on, this type of exploitation right now.
It's a weird world, roadside attraction type
But I mean,
energy
but at the
being
end of the day,
run.
they do. I mean, as long as they're being paid the right way, like they do have like, the carnal world is tough, and like I think the least tough part is like dealing with the people, the audience. Like the tougher stuff is the inner workings of the carnival and how you're treated money wise and just treated in general, you know.
Yeah.
And that's why you should watch Water for Elephants already.
I'll look into it.
Watch Water for Elephants and
I
watch Carnival on on Max, 2 seasons.
I've heard about it. It's got the small man from Twin Peaks.
Yep,
Yeah, Carnival.
Carnival.
Anyway,
And then so
let's
this
get
is like
into this, man.
this was episode 5 really ends with all these reunions. Hulk comes back, him and Rock have that huge WrestleMania match. And then Eric Bischoff comes in as an on-air GM, and then he brings Brett back too, which I have to mention, which I wish they did in this, which so Brett, we saw his WrestleMania match against Vince McMahon, and we saw like some of his matches leading up to it, and it was like really sad to watch and stuff. But he was doing dark matches at the time where he could still wrestle pretty well and get his shit in and was moving faster, but he could only do those in dark matches because on TV he couldn't do that and had to act like he was really hurt because he would have lost the money he had from insurance for his stroke and
Wow.
injuries. Yep. So like that's why if you watch dark matches, there's a couple of them out there from that period. He's still working like Brett, obviously a little bit older, but like can still do a
Yeah.
competent match. He could have done a match with the Kurt Angle or any of those fucking guys, but that's why on air he had to, and that's once again, we were worked by that. I had never understood that until seeing that footage recently.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so it was definitely like the match. He did like a lot of chair shots on Vince. It was a lot of, it
yeah,
was,
he moved
made
around
it
slow
seem,
and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, and he acted like he couldn't do anything anymore. But then you watch, the footage of dark matches, and he was killing it. And but yeah, at this point with WCW bought the wrestling business, went down because there's no competition, you know. And you have Stone Cold taking his ball, going home, because he hated creative, and
yeah,
he's also just fucked up from injuries.
started
And
doing some
then the
acting.
Rock went off to Hollywood, and this began the ruthless aggression era. And John Cena saying ruthless aggression,
Yeah,
and yeah, and it really Cena only got lucky because the Undertaker couldn't make that show, so he got to go out and do that match with Kurt Angle and do that line. And John Cena, do you know what song he came out to? If you remember from
what
that clip,
song?
which was cool. Since he didn't even have like a theme song yet, he came out to Marilyn Manson, the SmackDown theme.
Oh, really? Dope
Yeah, he
Show?
came out to
Was it Dope
Beautiful
Show?
People, Beautiful
Beautiful
People.
People. There you go.
Yeah, so it's just kind of funny seeing Cena come out to that. But
Yeah,
yeah, but it was, and then you had like we like obviously a lot of stuff with Trish, like her being, walking around like a dog and scary shit like that. But she said, listen, like it was an act. Like I knew what we were doing. I didn't give a shit. So I
yeah,
mean, as long as the talent's comfortable with it, I don't think it's a problem. Um, but then eventually, you know, Vince wanted her to do like a lesbian angle, like kissing, I think making out with like Tori Wilson or something like that. And Trish is like this at this time is already starting to wrestle really well and starting the women's revolution. And she's like, I don't want to do
yeah,
that. It doesn't make sense for my character. And then he made her to drop the title the week later. So he fucking punished
yeah,
her. And Steph didn't want to tell uh, but yeah, Steph didn't want to talk about the pregnant story or whatever, the storyline,
yeah,
because they're
yeah,
like, but then they cut to Vince and he said he's like happy to tell it. And he's just like, yeah, I went to a
yeah.
storyline where Steph was pregnant with my baby and I was the father. And then it
Yikes.
kind of ends a family soap opera of this episode of Vince being like, he was always harder on his family than anyone else and harder on Shane because he challenged him more. And Shane just wouldn't be pushed away. And then, he was put back in the spotlight. And Shane always wanted to just be, next. He was like, it was always him and Vince. He's always trying to learn from him and next to him and stuff. Like, but
Yeah,
the first kind of big thing between them, they get in this episode, which is funny because Shane was right. Shane goes to his dad and because he's like, let's buy a UFC and like I can like run it and
yeah.
like I'll put some of my money in and Vince turned it down. He's like, that just wasn't what our product was like. We build characters, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the UFC today, how do they make
It's
all their money?
similar.
By building
Yeah.
characters, dude.
Yeah.
They took the WWE
He couldn't see the
formula.
vision, just like his father couldn't see the vision. You know
Yep.
what I
And
mean?
yeah, and it was like probably like a jealousy thing too of just like, oh no, I
Yeah.
make I'm not going with your decisions. And then he says to Shane, we're entertainment business, not a sport business. But he had
Yeah.
just done the XFL. So what the fuck is he
Yeah.
talking
It's
about? It's
dumb.
just like countless hypocrisies. And and then Paul Heyman talks about like a definitive moment between him and between Shane and Vince where he like shit like Vince says to Shane like you're not gonna have the company while I'm alive, and he hands him a knife, and he starts pointing at his chest right here, pointing at his heart, and he's like, if you want this so bad, stick that dagger right here, and that's what you'll have to do if you want this company. If not, I'll know you're not the man to do it.
Yeah.
And then Shane leaves the business shortly after that because Shane wanted to take over. He brought it up at this point And Vince said it's not happening, and it's his business and his vision, and Shane's vision might be better, but it's not his vision. And turned down Shane's ideas. He had a lot of different ideas he was trying to do, and like just kept turning him down at this point. And yeah, and that Shane needed to know his place, and that ends the melodrama, and Shane leaves the company, and that's the melodrama of the McMahon family.
And now we're on episode 5.
6.
And
We're here. No, episode
6,
6.
whatever.
We
Yeah,
made the final episode.
So it starts out with the Trump stuff, like we were saying, but then it goes to the story of Vince's limo exploding, being halted by the real life tragedy of Chris Benoit,
Yeah.
his famicide and suicide.
Yeah, Trump and Vince did the hair versus hair match, which was, they said, the biggest selling pay-per-view events ever up to that point. That's what they say in there. I was just like, really? I was like, I guess. But I guess,
Yeah.
Trump had some, I don't know, he had some fans back then too, I guess. So,
Well, yeah.
and Vince,
WrestleMania 21 too, they were starting to kind of get some momentum again.
yeah.
You know what
Did
I
you see
mean?
the part where Vince does the whole death angle, and like some people actually thought he died? And
Yeah.
They said that Trump called to check to see if he was
Yeah.
okay.
What a fucking idiot, dude.
Because like
Anyway.
creative wanted him to do a midlife crisis angle, but he's like, no. What if someone kills me? And
Yeah.
then we also get a great quote from Vince saying, I got one computer talking to you right now. I've got a second computer thinking something completely different, and then a third computer that has a lot of fun, and it's involving sex.
That's psychotic.
Yeah. And like I love that he says that in the stock, even with all the sexual scandals and stuff they ask him. He's
Yeah.
like, and the fact that he says, the third computer has something to do with a lot of fun and it's involving sex. So it's like not even just like having fun, it's just like any fun, just involving sex is what it
Yeah.
made it seem like from that
That's
quote.
it's the Diddy brain. Anyway.
Yeah, you got a Diddy brain.
But so yeah, they get into how, the real life stuff with Benoit was happening. And how people tried to blame steroids. And then Chris Nowinski, the guy who's Harvard graduate turned wrestler turned
Yeah.
neurologist type guy, researcher. And he said that he was sure that Benoit had chronic traumatic enterocephaly, which is CTE. Stone Cold Austin said he doesn't believe in CTE, and The Undertaker was trying to be like, yeah, they were taking away chair shots from us, when that's like, he said he didn't understand why. But it's like, dude, come on.
Yeah, and they're saying like we and Vince is like they're professionals, like they don't really get concussions all the time. All right, it's a work, all the moves in the ring, you know.
Yeah, but
And
think about,
and
the
Undertaker said that
actual
too.
the
Undertaker says
actual
like,
unguarded
yeah,
headshots like Ken Shamrock and other people like that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And so then they go into how they what's it called? How
But then
after
Vince,
that,
yeah. Well, Vince does
they
eventually.
did look at his brain, Benoit.
Yeah, well, yeah. Nowinski calls Benoit's dad, and Benoit's dad was upset, but he said, "Yeah, I'll give you the brain to study." And then Vince does like a left turn, and he calls Nowinski and says, I'll give you money towards supporting you on this, and you can come in and do more studies, and we'll work with you on that."
If you
Which I
can't
think he
beat them,
knew.
join them.
Yeah, so I think he knew that was a good way to look better publicly, and a way to, like he's doing, and like whatever, like it looked better publicly, but it was the right thing to do, and it
Yeah,
was good that he did make that decision, even if it was for just to make the company look a certain way, but at
yeah,
least because he probably knew like, oh, we can just blame it on CT, I guess, but he did get rid of chair shots, and they said certain moves, meaning probably the pile driver, that was one of them that they got rid of.
yeah. Well, they
Um,
still don't have great health coverage in WWE.
no, they
They
don't.
do not. So it's still kind of a crime, you know? But anyway, what I was going to say though, they did change some stuff, and reporter Phil Mushnick spoke on it, the guy who was burying them back in the steroid trials days.
Yeah.
He spoke about how there's a lot of quality of life changes that he's seen for their wrestlers, and how they've been able to have a better work life balance in terms of like not doing 10 days on, 10 days off or
Yeah,
whatever, but
he cut the
doing
days
like,
down a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, doing like 4 days on, 3 days off, something like that. He was
Well,
saying,
that's
and
what was
then
helpful with
and he said it's even easier
splitting the
now.
brands. When they split the brands and like there's only a Raw and a SmackDown roster rather than all the wrestlers wrestling on both brands, like that helped a lot with schedules. It still does to this day. You know what I mean? To split that up.
Yeah,
But you still have some wrestlers that'll be on both shows because they're just workhorses, baby. Like the Matt
yeah.
Riddles of the world, which Riddle's coming back. Don't worry. But
There's another weird part that happened when the Undertaker started talking, and he was going into how he didn't know his streak was gonna end, and they're like on this like the
yeah,
day of, they were
told him the
like,
day of, dude.
he definitely knew.
No, I
He
think they
knew
just
he
told him the
wanted to
day.
do that.
I feel
Yeah.
like
No,
that
I'm
was
not
the
saying
best.
the Undertaker knew. I'm saying Vince knew.
Oh yeah, he did. I think Vince like realized that like he would have fought it, so he's just like if I tell him just like right before, he's not gonna have time to like go. You know what I mean? He's not gonna have time to be like think about it too much. You know, he's just gonna have to do it. And
Yeah.
it's funny because Undertaker was like one of the people that said that like yeah, there's not a lot of like concussions, you know, in it,
Exactly.
and then you cut to this match where he has a concussion. Um,
Yeah. Few minutes
and
into the match.
yeah, about he says 5 minutes in, and then he wrestles another 20 minutes. And then Vince says they cut to Vince, and Vince says, I could see where he maybe got a concussion, you know, watching the footage, but said he thought he just forgot the entire like because like Undertaker
He said
says like I forgot the entire match. Vince says
he's
he
saying
thought
he
he
was too
forgot it.
traumatized to remember.
Yeah, Vince said he it wasn't because of the concussion. He forgot the whole match because he was losing the streak and it was so traumatic for him. Like, come
Yeah.
on,
What the
dude.
fuck?
That was one of the most there was a lot of insane quotes in this from Vince and from people in general, but like that was fucking nuts. Especially Undertaker saying like, yeah, it's not concussions. Then they cut to him having a insane concussion. And then
Yeah.
Vince says, yeah, it was traumatic. And he says it with a straight face. I'm just like, are you fucking
Yeah.
I think that's
Well,
probably it has to be a joke between him and the Undertaker and Vince is
another
working
thing,
us.
another
Right? He
thing
had to be working us there, right?
they don't mention the yes movement at all either. They just like act like the ruthless aggression era happened and
Yeah.
then the modern era
No,
happened.
no,
You
no.
know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's why
Which
like
was a big thing. The
also
they
talking
only
about
reason
yeah,
they bring up the women's revolution is because they go into like the treatment of,
women
the
getting
women in the
better.
industry.
Yeah, and like wrestling and everything and like dude, it's like that was just so insane to me say and like Stone Cold just like in a straight face, I don't believe in CTE. You know, just like all right, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, like I haven't done extensive studies on CTE. I know like a good amount from reading some stuff and it seems pretty real.
Yeah.
It's, I mean,
Yeah.
considering you look at like different football players this happened to, like Junior Seau, like,
Well, denial's
uh,
powerful, you know what I mean? The Undertaker even said he would take a bullet for Vince. This was
yeah,
before a lot of the news broke, but like,
yeah,
come on, man.
he still would, dude.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like it's their dad. You don't see Cena say one bad word about him ever. When this stuff came
Yeah.
out, Cena went and got dinner with him and his fucking new Vince's new girlfriend and his fiance at the time. That, or I maybe it
Yikes.
was Cena's wife already. Yeah, that was one of the first things we saw. Like the first time
Yeah. Yeah.
he
Yeah.
left before he left the second time. Um, and they also touched on this too. Mushnick, I think, talks about it. All I people do is like how many he did an article about like so many wrestlers that die young, like
Mm-hmm.
endless, you know, and they start showing the British Bulldogs of the world, Mr.
Did they go into
Perfect.
Ashley Mazzaro? They talked about her briefly,
No.
I think. They didn't? The
Uh
entire thing?
I don't think they really did they?
I think you're
No.
probably right.
No, they
Yeah.
didn't, which I thought was pretty effed, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Because that's another huge and they didn't go into Candice Michelle really, who is most likely one of the people with hush money too that he paid off. They said the 14.3 million that I'm finding out, but like they didn't go into exactly who all those people were that he had to pay
Well,
off and
yeah,
or
it's to
why.
protect them too a little
Yeah.
bit, but yeah, it's
And then Vince about like the wrestlers that died, what he said was pretty fucked. He's like he said he's not he has no responsibility for it. They made their own choices. No responsibility whatsoever. And yeah, and it's just crazy because somehow they go into like how WWE has always avoided bad publicity from all the young deaths, like over that time period, over the entire wrestling period up to now, because like so many people, normal people in the mainstream, they watch that and they're just like, oh, whatever, another wrestler dead. That's what they do. Who cares?
Yeah,
It's like it's fucking
it
sad,
was
like
pretty sad.
how like a lot of the normal public look at wrestlers, and that's why I love that they're so prevalent in the mainstream again and like connect intertwined with politics, TV, and everything. Because
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, fuck you guys, dude. Like these guys
So
put their lives on the line, dude, and
yeah,
yeah, but
definitely.
he did take a more vigilant approach to drug use during this time period, and he did, which was nice, offered rehab to anybody, even ex-wrestlers that weren't in WWE anymore who'd pay for their rehabs, which he did for X-Pac and others. So that was
Yeah, well,
good.
that's a good friend of Triple H's.
Well,
So
I think Triple H starting to get more and more in his ear was helpful because Triple H, a wrestler himself, is obviously for the wrestlers. So
yeah,
I think
fair
he's
enough.
always someone that
Some of the
early
time.
on would kind of push some of the stuff. Oh, come on, dude. Trips is a sweetheart. All right.
Well, so then we get near the end of the era. They asked Vince if he would ever retire. He says no. Hogan, Shawn Michaels, Booker T, and Cena all say they do not see that happening either. And then the next segment goes right into his retirement in 2022 and then eventual return in 23.
Yeah. Well, before the retirement though, don't forget Shane returned in 2016
Oh, yeah, that too.
after
He
his
jumped
7-year
off the
hiatus.
cage.
Yeah,
His
and
dad,
they're all getting choked up in the ring too when they were all standing in there. And
yeah. And he
but
talks about how his dad gave him his pat on the back or whatever after his match against Undertaker at WrestleMania.
yeah, and I don't
And
remember Vince. I don't remember him getting beeped out during that segment of when he tells him the Undertaker's going to be his opponent, but he says the F word.
I
I
don't
guess they
know.
beeped that out on air. I don't remember
Yeah.
that though, but they show it, and Vince like during the segments, he's like,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
gonna you have a fucking beating right to your face when you face Undertaker at Mania,
Yeah.
and it was a dope match between him and Shane, and like you know uh and then they go through the Kurt Angle, which they made it seem like it happened right then and there, the Kurt Angle match, even though it was fucking 10, 10 or 12, like, like 15 years earlier. And they
Yeah.
like, that's like the timeline is so fucking stupid with Netflix, but like,
Yeah, it is a little weird.
normal public would just be like, oh, Shane came back and he did that match too, where he could go through the real glass.
I think it was just
And
trying to show the lengths he would go to have his dad have that validation, from
yeah, well, that's what
Vince
Shane
with
said.
his
He actually
face.
got a hug from his dad that night, and he barely
Yeah.
ever in his life has gotten hugs from him.
And Vince, there's the moment where Vince talks about it wasn't until like 2 days before or something like that before his father's death where he said, "I love you."
Yeah. And Vince says,
But he
and
said
he's
it.
like, and Vince says, like, I was always proud of Shane and what he attempted to do, and what his ideas and the stuff he wanted to do. And yeah. And he always just wanted to get that respect from him. And, all the wrestlers were saying, like, continue saying through this that Vince is a father figure, and like, but Shane's like, it's his real dad. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
but, yeah, but it's weird because, like, when Shane came back, like, he wanted to get back into trying to take the company over, like, or be high up and be doing that stuff, but they kept using him as like an in-ring talent. So and he felt like he had to do that to get back in the graces of his old man. And he felt like, yeah, like he wanted to keep running the family business. And then
Yeah.
Meltzer comes in and says, Steph was better suited to run the business and was more like her dad than Shane was,
Yeah. And
which
then
and
she
there's
she ended up taking it over with Triple H as like the other second in
yeah,
command, basically, or
yeah,
whatever it
yeah,
was.
and because they say that like Steph can put the iron fist down, where like Shane,
Or were
he's
they
too nice.
co-CEOs? Was that what they were called? Co-CEOs, something like that.
Well, Trips was like head of creative, and she's like CEO. I think they called him the
Okay.
COO or
Okay,
something like
that's what they
that.
called him, COO. Yeah,
And but yeah, then
of
and they
operations.
kind of say that Shane was too nice, and you can't be a boss in wrestling if you're too nice because the wrestlers take advantage of it. And I thought right away of one person,
Who?
Tony Khan.
Well, that's why
And
he's been cracking down a little more, and he's
well,
like
he's been
the
he's been
stuff
using
real
wrestlers to
quick,
crack down. He has been using
real
wrestlers to
quick.
do it for him,
Not
you know.
totally. Think about this. Everyone's saying, "Oh, it's so messed up that the Lucha Brothers, like, because
Yeah, he's
Fenix
being more like
had,
Vince now.
yeah, because come on, dude, like."
Holds them in their contract, and
He
they
paid for yeah, because he has to. It's the only like defense he
well, I mean,
has.
yeah, well,
He
he
has to
took
get a
the
little tougher. So
yeah,
he is
well,
getting tougher.
he did the sketchy Vince stuff where his it's
I don't think that's
hypocritical.
sketchy. I think that what they did was sketchy, the Lucha
Well,
Brothers,
he's not
because
letting them out of their their contract was
he's
done, but now he's using the injury time of Ray Phoenix against him and extending the contract with his injury time.
yeah, because for one, the talent was poached. For two, Lucha Brothers are like bragging about it to news outlets. And for three, fucking he paid for them while he paid for Ray Fenix while he was injured, and then he's just gonna turn around and be like, "All right, fuck you, I'm going to the other
Yeah.
company."
Well, I mean, listen,
It's
I don't
like,
think
come
it's I
on,
don't think it's wrong that he's doing it. I think it's finally he is taking a stronger business approach, but
yeah,
he is doing what Vince always did. You know what I mean? So like he's always tried to distinguish himself as someone that's not Vince, but now he's not letting people out of their contract. Look at Ricky Starks. You know what I
yeah, but
mean?
then,
Look what he did to Ethan
but on the
Page, kept him
same,
off TV for fucking ever. You know, and he's
yeah,
poached tons of
because
WWE talent. He hasn't poached any WWE talent,
I
you
don't think that
know?
he's poached the talent. I think the talent was usually let go and they didn't have a place to go. So they
Well,
went
I
to
mean,
AEW. You know what I mean?
or they just didn't re-sign. A lot of them, like Moxley, was just like, "I'm
Yeah,
fucking
because
leaving."
they weren't being treated well. You know what I mean? They
Yeah,
weren't
well,
given good
that's
storylines. They weren't given a good spot. You know what I mean? So
just like Ethan Page, just like Ricky Starks, dude. The
yeah,
Lucha
but I
Bros,
mean
I agree, but like Lucha Bros, like he has to like
those guys weren't top card and they were given a lot of opportunities, you know. Right before
really,
Ethan Page left, he was ROH
really,
champion.
really, they didn't give him top opportunity. I wouldn't say it's a top opportunity right now.
Well, besides that,
He
Ethan
should have
Page
been
has
given
been
the
given a
TNT
lot of stuff.
title with a Scorpio Sky fucking uh was his teammate, and they should have led to that.
Well, it
But
is what it is. That's not so much like, I don't think that's so much of a poaching situation. Whereas, like, maybe Ricky Starks or the Lucha
yeah, well, at
Brothers
the end of the
would
day,
more
like
be.
it's hard to say it's poaching between either companies because like if you're disgruntled in AEW or you're disgruntled
Yeah.
wrestler in WWE, where else are you going to go? You're going to go
Yeah.
to the other top company. You're either going to go
Yeah.
this way or that way. So like,
That's
but
what
I
I'm
think it's
saying. So
good that Tony's
I'm just
laying. No,
saying
I
he's
agree. He's laying
getting
the
a
law
little tough.
down. Yeah,
Yeah.
but he should stay away from the I'm not Vince at all because dude, Vince, yeah, like
I think it's
as
different.
a businessman with wrestling, it's a war though. You know, like WCW and WWE, like you can't let just talent go over there and fuck you in the ratings and just leave and do that shit. You got to hold on to him longer if you can, and he does have to start doing the contracts where there's a no compete clause for at least 3 months after. I mean, look what happened to CM Punk. He's able to just show
Oh
up at
yeah.
Survivor Series, you know?
I know.
Like you got to have
Yeah.
that in the contracts, dude. You have to.
There have been some changes in like the laws on non-competes, but I don't know
Yeah,
if
no,
that stands always
yeah, no, there
100%,
was some like stuff on that, but you got to have something like that in place because yeah, you can't let your product get fucked. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And it's hard like both rosters are gigantic. They are, and it's hard
Yeah.
to fucking have everyone eat and have great storylines or like stuff just doesn't work out, you know? And then it kind of
Yeah.
goes into WWE's like revamped era of getting the $1 billion deal with that
TKO.
With Peacock first
Oh,
before all that
Peacock.
happened,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then they get the $4 billion deal at Fox like all in the same year, and then
Hmm.
AEW competition obviously ramps things up, you know, and a big
Yeah.
part of that was Cody, who then comes to WWE and makes his return, and
Finishes his story.
yeah, and then HBK like says that like or whoever it was like says like Vince's success now from those deals made him stay even longer. And HBK said that Trips was in line for the succession. Like that's who was, you know, you're supposed to give it to is Trips. And then, you know, and then Vince goes into never sees himself retiring. And Vince says, "I want to retire one day." Is what you're like people that say that
I
because
have
all you
no
do when you
sympathy
retire,
for
yeah,
them. Yeah.
because and those people can just like do that and go die, but I'm not gonna fucking do it. So then
Yeah.
that, and they don't go really into something as wrestling fans. We know, like, during this time period too, Triple H has his, the bad heart condition happens, almost dies, has to get surgery and get a stent put in his heart and all that. And during that time period, Vince fires all the wrestlers that Triple H really cared about and brought on and wants to do more stuff with. He fires all the creative that Triple
Yeah.
H worked with and had on, and got rid of
Regal.
all of them. Yeah, as like a power move to be like, this is my fucking company still. You know what I mean? It goes back to
Yeah.
that quote that he said when he was like, I wanted to be outside the ring when with Bret Hart when he did the screw job, to look over him and for him to see like who's company and who's running this shit, like who's, you know what I mean? Like he did the same thing to Shane too. So it's like, and that leads to what you're saying. June 2022, Vince steps down due to the hush money scandal of first they say 3 million, then they end up finding out it's 14.3 million. And this was the board of directors that were looking into this and brought this to light. You know what I mean? Because like they were ready to push Vince out and move this era on because they knew there was a lot of weird stuff. And we're in an era, at least, where like a lot of that stuff, like people have to be held accountable for it. You know, like the Me Too
Yeah.
movement, like that's best. Finally, people were being held accountable for fucked up things, especially dealing with sexual abuse and abuse of power. Like it was like in Hollywood, and it's just like with this, but like,
Yeah.
and this happens every single time with WWE as we went through this whole timeline. Every time there's a huge bump in revenue and more into the mainstream, you're going to be attacked and your darker stuff is going to come to light. Whereas when the business wasn't completely mainstream and a lot of people liked it, like everything was kept under wraps and no one cared to look into it because they didn't give a shit. They looked at it,
Yeah.
the business, as a joke. But when you start getting $1 billion deals again, like people start to take it serious, because
Yeah.
people, if
True.
there's one thing people take serious, it's money.
No one stays at the
So
top forever, especially when you're
yeah,
doing
and
fucking creepy shit.
and the WWE board members said they got this from this anonymous tip through an email. It's like, okay, you guys looked into this yourself, because it was a
Yeah.
culture of secrecy, and that's why they never wanted reporters and people like the reporters getting like an inside look to any of that stuff. And that's why Mushnick,
Yeah.
like, he fucking hated him because he's the one guy that through all the whole time period was like trying to find out this dark stuff. And he would get a lot of
Yeah.
his stuff from wrestlers. You know what I mean? Those were his inside guys.
But yeah, so then Vince came back and
Yep.
returned to the company.
Yep. And before he left though, he did that SmackDown appearance where he's basically saying he's retiring. He
Yeah.
said he retired on Twitter that day, and then that SmackDown appearance was the one of the biggest ratings of that year, and he had a huge pop from all the fans.
Yeah.
So it just shows you where we're at now. Is it really much different than like the early '90s or like them all screaming "slut" and booing Stephanie after she was Mickey'd on a thing? Like
I think
this
it's
ain't all this hot.
different. I think it's that crowd specifically, WWE fans are like, "Oh my god, this is a guy that we never see in the ring ever anymore." You know what I
And they
mean?
forget it, and they forget
So I
about
think
everything. Wrestling
yes,
does
I think
that though. It's
nostalgia is a
weird.
powerful drug.
It's
And
no,
it's
it's
the
weird because
nostalgia.
like yeah, and at that time too, all it was known hush money, but they were bringing up the Ashley Mazzaro stuff and that Wall Street uh expose on it, and they were bringing up a lot of the referee Rita, and they were bringing up a lot of different stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and then Vince, his on air like sescapades were just like played for laughs all the time, and as a way to like blur the lines
Yeah.
intentionally. And he even did something they talked about in it where like because he got in trouble too because another person that came forward was a tanning salon employee that said he showed nude pics of himself to her and then he groped her, and that was part of the hush money too, and like so. And then like 12, so and then there was 7.5 million to coerce a former female wrestler into sex, and then when she didn't, he fired her.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then he resigned after that Friday, and they literally did it. WWE had him do the retirement tweet that morning, and then do the retirement on air for ratings. You know, And then Steph starts the show and has everyone saying "Thank you, Vince" chant. She's like, "Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Vince." And yeah, and like and then they got great ratings from it, and they just used it as fucking a way to get money and gave him a thank you and a send off,
Yeah.
and that leads to Vinnie Mac coming back like 6 months later, January 2023, comes back as the executive chairman, and as soon as he does that, Stephanie resigns and steps down because
Yeah.
her and Triple H, and to say like her saying thank you Vince stuff, like I think she was just happy she was just gonna do something nice for her dad and get rid of him. You know what I mean? Because her and
Fair enough.
Trips are ready to run the show, and he comes back and he's able to take over as the main executive of the board again, the chairman, because he still owned a higher percentage of the company. So he had more votes than the whole board himself. So yeah, he had the controlling votes, and then he fired everyone on the board of directors and hired all new ones.
Yeah.
And then they say that like he was, and then he brings up the whole thing that he was talked into quitting by someone close to him, which presumably it was Stephanie. And then Pritchard comes in again. He says, I have no idea why Stephanie left. I have no idea." Oh, okay. Stephanie and like this is the one that like pushed him out and said, "Yeah, it's time for you to end. Like this is fucked up." All she probably knew a lot of the weird stuff coming out. And, like you're gonna fuck us, like it's time for you to let go. I'll run the business end. And I'll have Hunter doing the creative. So
Yeah.
once he came back, Stephanie's like, "Fuck this, dude," you know. And yeah. And then it's funny because then what he did to Shane all back then, UFC and WWE merged to come to the TKO group, and he sold the company for 9 million to Endeavor. But this is the first time where he didn't have 51% of ownership anymore. Where that's why he's able to take back the board of directors last time because he had 51% to everyone else's 49 always.
Yeah.
So which is important because that's why they're able to get rid of him easier this time. And the company at this time though had the best rating since 2002, and over this past 2024, and the most money from TV deals. And then they get the Netflix deal for $5 billion, and yeah, and it's just like, and then they go to fucking Bruce Pritchard,
Yeah. He was
who's
interviewed for the final episode after seeing a
yeah,
few completed episodes beforehand. He said it was designed to make Vince look bad. 2 days after that interview was filmed, the details of Grant's lawsuit became public. Do you want to hear some of the
yeah,
details real quick?
who was one of the three who made up 3 million of that 3.3 million of the hush money.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there was like three several noteworthy allegations. In June 2020, Grant McMahon and a personal friend of McMahon engaged in a threesome in which at one point McMahon defecated upon her. He temporarily retired to the restroom to clean himself, at which point the threesome continued for an hour and a half while she was still covered in his feces. In June 2021, Laurinaitis and McMahon cornered her and pulled her in between them, forcibly touched her before ultimately putting her on top of a table in between them. She begged them to stop, but they forced themselves on her, each taking turns restraining her for the other. During the course of her employment, McMahon shared sexually explicit media with a world famous athlete and former UFC champion who was identified by the Wall Street Journal as Brock Lesnar to entice him to sign a new WWE contract, which he eventually did sign.
Yep.
And
And
that is what
that's
pushed him
the
out.
huge thing, like they allege, so allegedly, but he forced her, that like was having forcing her to have sex with other guys and trafficking her, at the threat of being
Yeah.
fired. And then also he had dildos named after male wrestlers. Like great.
Yeah, just
Fucking dildo collection.
no end to the perversions,
Yeah, just
in
like Diddy. Diddy
degradation,
had a bunch. They found tons of
depravity.
dildos they found tons of dildos at Diddy's place.
Yeah, well, that's why
It's
it makes
just
sense that they were such good buddies. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, they could they're on the same level, I guess, and had a lot to talk about. But yeah, and then and then Vince finally resigns, the day after that lawsuit came out. And you know what they actually did? I lied to you. I did lie. They did talk about Ashley Mazzaro.
They did, yeah. I thought I
Yeah,
remembered
so
that.
yeah, it was just
And
weird because
the
it came
abuse
towards it came at
overseas.
it came at the end of the episode. Yeah, so like 2016, Ashley Mazzaro claimed she was raped in Kuwait by a man posing as a military doctor, and she told Vince, but he didn't do anything. And then she later, committed suicide, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because there was other set abuse going on with her too. If you watch interviews with like one of her close friends or sister, I believe, who she confided and told a lot of stuff to, and a lot of weird stuff involving Johnny Scumbag, like Johnny Ace. Johnny Ace, I'm a
Yeah.
fucking piece of shit. And then yeah, and then they also say like how Ashley said that he made sexual advances towards her, and then just made and she like when she turned them down, he made storylines just to embarrass her. And then we cut to WrestleMania 2024, um, and like the year no one could like answer anything about Vince, and they thought Vince is like they ask like all the wrestlers, Undertaker and all these people, like, what do you think Vince's legacy will be? And all of them are just
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I don't know. And literally every single one of them couldn't answer. It was funny. They just went blank. And then we get to the hero of this whole doc, Tony Atlas, and he wasn't afraid to answer. And he said he'll be known as the best promoter of all time. So I don't, that was his. And then Vince says he doesn't have a legacy, was his answer. I don't have one.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
episode
And
ends with a message saying Vince is currently under investigation for his allegations of sexual misconduct and trafficking. Brock Lesnar has not commented on his involvement, and Grant's lawsuit is on hold while the federal investigation is going on.
yeah. And everything is allegedly, allegedly,
Well,
allegedly. I think we said enough allegedlys now.
I would say this was a pretty good documentary. I think they cover a lot of time, but it's like when they were making this, the goal of this wasn't to totally cover, I think, these allegations hadn't came up yet. You know what I
Yeah, the
mean?
Janelle Grant
So
ones. Yeah, that's why it got
yeah,
extended, and that did like take longer to come out. But
yeah,
I was happy that they touched on like, because one thing we talked about on podcast earlier, like what do we expect from this documentary? And I did like I'm glad they did touch on, the Ring Boy scandal. They touched on all the other sex allegations,
yeah.
and Ashley touching on the tanning salon worker. So, on the murder, Jimmy Fly Snuka killing his girlfriend.
Yeah, even
So
though they
like
brushed over it real quick,
I
there
feel
was a
like a
couple
lot of them
things
they did brush
they
over a little bit fast. I agree
it's
with
hard
that.
because he's been
It's
in
a
this
lot.
business for so long. He's 79 years old, you know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
it's a long life to chronicle inside a documentary. But
Yeah. But I feel like do you think the documentary did what it was initially or just in general supposed to do, get us to actually know who Vince McMahon really is?
I don't think that we know totally who he is. I think we have an idea of who he is
Yeah,
because
and he
we know some of the things he's done. We know his thoughts, which I think a lot of the things in these interviews are his real thoughts, you
yeah,
know.
then some of them and then a lot of them are works though too, where he's like, I don't remember like that lawsuit with CEO, I don't remember that. Or just like
Yeah.
he just says he just says shit
But
where you're just like or like they show him
he
being a hypocrite and they cut to like
yeah,
stuff of like
but he knows he's going to be in a documentary. He knows he's not supposed to be in character. The whole thing starts with him saying, "Oh, I'm usually never not in character, so
and,
this is
and
going
he's
to
like
be hard."
yeah, and he's probably only you're only gonna get half of the real me. He says something like that. Like you're only
Yeah,
probably gonna
which
get
is
it
just
half.
a way to cover his tracks. Like I believe that that's
Yeah.
the person he is, and
Yeah, it was weird seeing him say
yeah,
fuck so much too.
yeah,
Bob Costas though is the weirdest fuck, but like I would say like episodes like 4 through 6 were the meat of this, whereas like the first 3 episodes was just mansplaining to wrestling, about the wrestling companies, and I knew they would do some of that because they want a mainstream audience too, so they have to kind
yeah.
of
It's made by the Tiger King
explain
guy.
certain stuff. Yeah, but at the same time, like I didn't learn as a wrestling fan. I don't. There wasn't too many things that I can say I learned that were new throughout the stock, except like the new quotes that have been said that were wild.
Yeah.
But there wasn't like any
Yeah.
new info where I was like, oh fuck, I never knew that before. But really,
Yeah. Well, I think the approach that they took the doc from was just to try to tell the whole story.
yeah.
But, you
I
know,
just feel like they didn't
obviously
even
with
tell
the
his
stuff that
childhood
came
that
out,
much.
yeah,
It's kind
he
of like
probably didn't want to talk about it too much.
yeah, I do feel like they were kind of like it was very all over the place at times. Like even just we went through the whole timeline of it, and it's like they'll touch on something, they'll touch on it a little bit later, even though it like you were just talking about WCW, and now you're going back to like some other scandal or something. So like it was kind of like scattered a bit throughout the
Yeah.
doc. Like, what do you give it on a Meltzer 5-star rating though? The doc.
I'd give
What's
it
your
a
letterbox
3.
rating, dog?
I'd give it a 3.
3. Yeah, I would that's where I'm at. I would say a 3. I would
Yeah.
say it's if you're a wrestling fan, even if you're not a wrestling fan, it's you should watch it. I would say it's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd give it 3 stars. It
If
was
you if you
I was
already
expecting more. I was.
I would say it's not totally essential viewing if you already know like pretty much everything about Vince
Yeah,
just from like
but if
reading dirt sheets and
yeah,
being a fan of wrestling for like however long you've been, you know.
yeah, I think worthwhile parts for wrestling fans is just like seeing a lot of the wrestlers talk and
Hmm.
have new quotes and talk about different stuff and like
Yeah.
the eras and be a little more loose about it than they are in WWE home videos. Like they can
Yeah,
curse, they can kind
that
of fucking like
that was kind of a cooler thing about it too.
yeah.
Is
It was
that it
more
was a
like yeah.
WWE documentary not made by WWE, you
Yeah,
know.
it was like a dark side of the ring type thing with like the wrestlers where like they can, really, really be themselves and they're not trying to like, yeah, yeah, when the screw job happened, blah, blah, blah. They can be like, yeah, it was fucked up. I was a prick. This guy's a dickhead, this and that.
Yeah.
Like, so I think it's like worth it in that sense for wrestling fans, but like you're not going to learn anything new if you're an everyday wrestling fan. And even someone
What
that
a
watches wrestling just a little bit, like probably knows
yeah.
most of the stuff.
I think a good way to end this episode of Invasion Angle Deep Dives is to say what we think his legacy is.
Yeah, I think I'm like everyone in that documentary. I don't fucking know. I think his legacy is a
Exactly.
mixture of um success and but this at the expense of other people a lot of the time and like
Yeah.
becoming the person, the people you always hated, becoming
Yeah.
the villain that you always like, from his abuse in childhood to like him hating rich people and all this stuff and the way they would intimidate with their money and power, like hating all that stuff. And he talks about like becoming it, you know,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And like, yeah, he's the greatest promoter of all time. Like, I like, as a wrestling fan, like growing up and just it's hard because like you look up to this guy because he's given you so much. You know what I mean? And he's such an important part of your life as a wrestling fan all the time. Like even his character and all that stuff, like and as you were saying, like wrestlers and talent in general get like passes because like we're huge fans, and then all of a sudden when the lights come on, the music hits, we forget everything. You know,
Hmm.
it's like how
Nostalgia and the glitz and glamour can really
uh, and I
make it
don't think
hard
it's
for people.
and I have to say like wrestling fans are also like very forgiving people too.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that's an
because
aspect of it.
it's hard to just be like, all right, well, like this thing that means a lot to me and my family and friends and whatever, like, do I really want it to be taken away because one of the biggest like people running it is a shitty person, you know?
Yeah,
Or does the wrestling still mean something to me? You know what I mean? So
yeah. Well, because I mean I always cared about like these wrestlers put their lives on the line, and it's like they shouldn't have to fucking deal with backlash because of what the owner or other people are doing or other wrestlers have done,
yeah.
because there's a lot of I think culture has changed. They talk about that through the doc a lot. Like the culture has changed a ton. Backstage is more professional now, and like we were talking about this with Hunter James. Like it's
Yeah.
professional but also chill. People can hang out and take a shot, and like kind of it's a better culture. And you got like
Yeah.
the guys playing some video games and shit, and women are treated. I think being treated a lot better now that Trips is running the show. And Stephanie was a huge component of the women's revolution. So I think her being involved with the company, you know, in some facet, but that is always going to be good because, yeah, she did a lot for women and pushing that and pushing for that pay-per-view and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But, what would you say his legacy is?
I mean, I kind of agree with what you were saying. You know, it's like he's become, you know, the biggest name in the business, like in
Yeah,
his own way, but also the way he got there was at the cost of lives and
yeah,
fucking a lot of things, you know?
yeah. And it's
So,
hard. It's hard because like it was you were saying, like celebrities, you know, wrestlers are like they're like family members. You know what I mean? They're like people's outlets when they're having a fucked up day or whatever. Like I got wrestling at least, I got this movie, I got this TV, and like you watch it so much, like they become like a family member, like the way you view them. And it's hard when they do fucked up things to be like I don't know, but like I still like love him a part of me. Like what do I do with these thoughts?
yeah.
Like how can I just hate him and hate all this? Like this sucks, you know? And
With
like
him, I think it's kind of easy because he was a pretty hateable character as well. So
yeah,
it's
no,
like,
yeah. I'm,
you
you know,
know,
I've been done with him for a while as a fucking human
I
being
think
and
the
waiting for
biggest
trips to take over
issue,
for years.
yeah, I think the biggest issue is like reconciling like feelings on like, oh, well, like what about all the old footage and all the old moments, you
Yeah,
know? Like I was even
yeah,
enjoying seeing some of like the old angles, like, you know, at
yeah,
least him and Austin and stuff, and being like, oh wow, like it's sad that that's all very
yeah.
tarnished,
Well,
you
that's what I'm
know?
saying. Like, and you look at someone like Chris Benoit too. It's just like a lot of wrestling fans were just like, it sucks what happened, but like we still, you know, go back and look at some of his footage and like forget about it in moments. It's just like, wow, this was amazing. This was like, and you go
Yeah,
back to like being a kid and watching it, and it brings you in a time machine to like, you know, greatest parts of your life and stuff. And then you're just like, oh wait, this fucking guy did this, but he also gave me so
yeah,
much like joy. It's hard. And it's just like,
yeah,
you know, it's just like people that have family members that do something terrible. It's just like, how do you, it's hard to reconcile those feelings and being like, and that's why
yeah,
like I think a lot of America is going to be dealing with this with the Diddy allegations, like because there's going to be a lot of celebrities and a lot of people that people look up to, and they're going to be like, how do I reconcile these feelings? Like this is
yeah.
fucked, you
Like
know? And we
Ashton
saw,
Kutcher even is being
yeah,
implicated with things. People
yeah.
that, you know,
I
he's a
mean,
person that a lot of people are like, oh, I can't imagine him not being, you
yeah, but
know,
best friends with Danny Masterson and P. Diddy, like
yeah,
there's smoke, there's fucking fire, and then there's
exactly.
fucking gasoline drenched all over Ashton right now. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, dude, I mean, they're showing a lot of Diddy photos. Like, there's Leonardo DiCaprio at a lot of these parties. You know, I'm really
Yeah.
hoping Leo didn't do anything fucking wrong or bad because
So,
there's a lot of celebrities that were there that didn't do anything, but like, it's fucked up,
in
dude.
that same token, it makes you think about Vince's family. It makes you think about the top people at WWE. It makes you think about what did Triple H know? What did Stephanie know? What
Yeah.
did, you know what I mean?
Well, they
Not to
knew enough to want
totally,
to get rid of him. You know, well, I mean, they didn't have any
yeah.
power though. That's the problem. You know, what are you gonna do? Get fired? That's when they go to Tony Atlas and then like when he's talking about his pecker being grabbed by Pat Patterson, they're like, oh, like well, why don't you just go to Vince? And he starts
Who are you
laughing.
gonna
He's like, are you
tell?
fucking kidding
Yeah.
me? He's like, tell somebody. He's like, I'll get fired. You'll get fired. Like, what are you gonna? You can't do anything. You
Yeah.
know. There's also showed like how like kind of fucking naive the people doing this documentary were because they were like they made him say the pecker line a million times. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
Like you said, that was sexual abuse? You know, this is coming up right now. And he's like,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, because
dude.
they
Are you
probably wanted
kidding
to make
me?
sure they had the sound bite nice and clear so that it's
I
not
know
just like he's not
his
joking, it's
Virginia,
not a
yeah,
throwaway,
yeah, his
you
Virginia
know.
accent. I love, yeah, I love Atlas for sending things straight this whole doc, and someone had to, and then he's like, well, hold on a second, I got to get home. I got to need my wife to stomp on my face.
Yeah, let's not get into that. I was thinking about that too
I
when
know,
those
I just
videos
like,
came
I mean,
out.
dude, he puts them out. He doesn't care. Like he's like, that's what he's into. So I
Anyway,
mean, can't hate on you know, I'm not gonna fetish hate.
true, no kink shaming.
Long as yeah, no kink
As
shaming
long
here,
as there's consensual.
as long as it's consensual with a consensual penis, as you know, our
Enzo
boy
said,
said.
yep, what a way to end this episode. This has been a good one. We've dove all the way deep
We
and
couldn't dive any deeper, dude, honestly.
yeah, without
I
drowning.
yeah, our heads exploding from being so deep from the pressure, you
Pressure,
know.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
pressure.
That's been
Invasion
another deep
angle,
dive.
been our deep dive. We love you. Peace and love, peace and love. Invasion angle.
Invasion angle.
Bet you love that sweet ass podcast. I am John Cena and I approve this message. Boobies.